Hey everybody, Andrea here. We just want to give you guys a trigger warning. This episode depicts several scenes that feature suicide. If you or anyone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please know that you're not alone. In the United States, you can dial 988 from your cell and be connected with a trained professional at the Suicide and Life Crisis Helpline. You can also text 988 to be connected to support groups if you're struggling with the loss of a loved one due to suicide. Now, on to the show. What's up, everybody? It's Andrea. Today, Worf knows exactly how to wake a woman up right. Star Trek does not know how to show grief at all. And we ask the question, why isn't there just like a window in the nacelle tube? Stick with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we are talking Season 7, Episode 18. 18 already! 18?
Bum, bum, bum. Oh, wait.
No, I feel like we need to cue some heartbreak music.
Oh, gosh. Let's save that to the last episode.
This episode is Eye of the Beholder. It was written by Brandon Braga and directed by Renee Echevarria. Troy investigates a crewman's suicide and discovers that a murder was committed on the ship while it was being built, and that the murderer is still aboard.
Bum, bum, bum. For reals this time. Yeah, that is such an interesting premise. Like, I'm so excited to get into this
Agatha
episode.
Christie in space.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm so excited to get into this episode. But before we jump in, we have a very special guest with us, which I'm so excited to introduce. Her name is Heidi Unruh. She is a writing coach, nonprofit consultant. She is a certified nerd, just like us. Bam, bam, bam. She's the author of 6 nonfiction books, and writing a Star Trek novel is on her bucket list. She also lives in Hitchinson, Kansas, but has never seen a tornado. Heidi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Heidi.
Thank you. I am in nerd heaven right now. I'm telling you, this is like highlight. Thank you. I am such a fan of this show.
Oh,
I found you when I was painting one of my kids' rooms, and I needed to just like listen, put something on as background, and boom, that was it. I was hooked.
I hope all your painting was a little bit crooked because you were laughing so hard. That's my hope for you.
It's crooked anyway. Sorry.
See, that's perfect. You know what? I'm just like you, Heidi. I live alone, which I actually quite enjoy now, and I will always have podcasts and audiobooks on when I'm like doing dishes or vacuuming or doing laundry, which I'm one of those people who can do all the laundry, but then once it's all clean, it's just in a big wrinkly pile on the bed. And I'm like, I got to spend like 30 minutes folding all of this. And this is like such a boring task. I'm like,
yep.
What does an audiobook or a podcast have to say to help me distract me to get through this?
Yep.
100%.
Exactly. Yep.
I have quite a long commute for work too. So I'm always like podcast, audiobook, like it's the way.
So we're so excited to have you on board. And thank you for the kind words. We love hearing from our listeners because, and one of the things you said off mic, Heidi, was that you felt like you were just like, when you listen to our show, you felt like you were just talking to a good friend or something like that.
Yeah.
That has been our goal from episode 1, that when people listen to this show, they feel like they're talking with a good friend. So that's why we expect you, if you are listening, we expect you to be talking out loud back to us. We don't care if you're driving. We don't care if you're running. We expect you to be like, what girl, that's crazy. Or like, totally.
Oh my gosh, cool. I do that. I am talking out loud in response to your show.
Our goal, honestly, is to make people look at you like you're a little crazy because you're talking out loud to nobody. Like that's the fun of it, honestly.
Sometimes I can anticipate what you're going to say. So I'm
you know us.
Andrea's going to say, I hate this. Or she's going to say this.
Let's see what happens in this episode. We're going to see how many times you're right out of wrong with what your expectations are.
That's like nerd level 1,000. I love it. So before we jump into this episode, Heidi, I'm going to ask 2 questions. We always ask these to our guests. How did you get into Star Trek, TNG, or Star Trek in particular? And who's your favorite character and why?
Answering how I got into Star Trek is a little bit difficult for me because it's just been so soaked into my life. I got my Trekkiness from both my parents. When I was a little kid, my mom had a fan crush on Spock. And I remember thinking that Trekkians were really cool. I mean, I'm a very logical person, and like, here was a role model for me, and he was cute. And growing up, Trek was just part of my life. My first date was to see the movie Star Trek V with the whales. And
oh my
the
God,
space whales, so cool. Space
and
whales.
I think about you because you're like, you know all this stuff about whales, and so sometime I would love you to review the movies and give your like sciencey take on it. But
oh my
and let
God,
us know if
there's
whales
an
could
idea.
live in space.
Yeah.
What parameters? Heidi, you know what? This is a question we had, as you know, we had a question on, I think it was on Sarek or it was on whatever the episode is where Spock came. And we were like, who could have a crush on Spock? Because Kirk was supposed to be like the love interest, right? And you were like, oh, my mom. You're like, my mom had a huge crush on Spock. And I was like, why? So I would love to hear that. And you had a crush on Spock. So please let me know what was the thing about him other than he's smart? Was there something else, or was that more than enough?
He's physically good looking too. And
he is very handsome.
He's really handsome.
And the smart thing for me is a turn on. And
yep,
I just like that he is logical. Because Kirk I'm a T on the Myers-Briggs, so I'm a thinker. I'm like a way T, which is one of the reasons I love the show, because I don't like all this touchy-feely stuff. And so, Spock just cuts through that, and he's just like, this is not logical. I'm like, you're right, it isn't logical. I'm glad you said that. So half the time I'm reacting like Spock, and everybody else is like, oh, working around with all their little feels, and I'm just like, just stay calm, just be a Spock about this. but he doesn't have like heart in the sense of like, mushy stuff, but he has a heart in the sense that he is so dedicated and loyal to his friends, to his peeps. So that's also a good quality for me.
Oh, I love that.
So. I love that. And I will say, as I've gotten older, I find myself more attracted to men who are, I think, a little bit more Spocky than Kirk. Kirk is like sexy, fun, flies off the handle, very emotional. But like, as you get older, I'm like, no, that just translates to me as like unstable. And I already had that. Okay. I don't want that again. So I want some nice like stability and like ability to like think logically through things where I'm like, ooh, that is sexy. That's really nice. But it's amazing how like our attraction changes over the years, right?
Yeah, no, seriously, because I am married now to a extreme F. Like he's as F as I am T feeling, and opposites do attract. So I have learned to value what he brings to me, and he's learned to value my logicness sometimes. And so we kind of complement each other that way. But I still would never have a crush on Kirk because he was just so full of himself.
Yeah, he was douchey.
He was the most arrogant person ever. Yeah.
So sorry, cut you off. Your second question was, who's your favorite character? Which you can, if there's too many favorites, maybe you can pick favorite TNG or favorite season 7 or something like that if you need to narrow it down.
Well, do you mind if I go back and finish just a little bit on the Star Trek story?
Of course. Please do.
Because this is partly why it's important to me. Because watching Star Trek with my mom was such a part of my life. And when I went off to college and seminary, at a distance, Mom and I would call each other after each episode to break it down, compare our notes on our show. It was like our own little podcast. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about you, because she's been gone for 20 years now. So part of what I enjoy about listening to podcasts is it brings up memories of talking about those episodes with my mom. So
thank you so much for sharing that. And I really love and appreciate that it was just a special thing for you and your mom. For Andrea and I, it was a special thing with us and our dads. But my mom was a huge Trekkie, and my mom was the one who literally got me into it, because she was like, sit down, watch this. You're going to like it. Trust me. And I was like, you're right. How'd you know? But I really, I love that. And a lot of our friends, it was their dad. It was their uncles. It was like the male influences in their lives who were really the sci-fi people. Yeah. So I just really appreciate that this was a special bond with your mom.
It was. And my dad was more the next gen fan. My mom's favorites were the original and then later Enterprise. Now my husband and I, our favorite now to watch and rewatch is DS9. So Deep Space is probably my favorite, but you kind of always go back to your first love, which for me was Next Gen.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, DS9 is really cool. It's just a completely different type of storytelling, right? Like it's very different. So I love that they took an episodic show and made it long form storytelling. And I think that that's really cool, because if you're a fan of long form storytelling, there's a Trek for you. If you're a fan of episodics, there's a Trek for you. If you're a fan of funny sci-fi, there's a Trek for you. Lower Decks, there's a Trek for everyone. And that's part of, I think, what makes Trek so cool, is because it's so inclusive, in terms of the characters, but it's inclusive in terms of the types of stories that it delivers. So it gets this like really broad audience as well. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love that you and your mom had little breakdowns of the episode and shared it. That's so sweet. That is just like the most darling thing.
It's a good memory.
I love that. Okay, so favorite character and why?
Yes. Well, I was trying to think about how I was going to answer this question, and I thought about saying Aquiel just to set you both off.
Because you actually do
on the show.
You actually do like Aquiel.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I do like Aquiel.
So Heidi emails us and she says, "I've always liked Aquiel and I've always liked the show, like the character and that episode." And I was like, how very interesting.
She did there. Yeah. I was like, wow, this woman knows how she feels about it. Which we really welcome, actually.
But who's your real favorite character? Because it's not Aquiel.
Yeah, well, I think as you established earlier that we're not allowed to say Picard, because that would just be everybody's favorite. But if not Picard, I would say it's a tie for me between Data and 7th season Deanna Troi. And this is a big 7th Deanna Troi episode. So
7th season Troi, 6th and 7th season Troi is like so clutch. I wish we had her in season 1. Oh my gosh. Like the powerhouse she could have been. But it takes time to develop characters and stuff.
I like seeing her growth.
Yes. And I will say this show ended in 1993. So we're, towards the tail end of season 7. We're squarely in 1993 writing. 90s writing of women was not strong, famously not strong. So considering that they made her such a clutch performer on the bridge, and she wasn't like gratitude and joy and all that bullshitty weeping, and they like took her from that space cheerleader to such a strong clutch character. Major props to the writing team in 1993 who were way ahead of their time, because she was a character that would work today in 2023.
She would. There was a scene where she was crying and it was just like tears were streaming down her face and she was really like upset and she was, just like staring or whatever. And I was like, whoa, it was such a powerful and emotional scene. And I just contrasted that to the nonsense of season 1, where every time you turn around, she's like, "But Bill, don't you still love me, Bill?" You're like, girl, stop being so thirsty. Like this whole ship is full of people. You could have any
and Bill would be fine with you dating any of them. Go for one.
Absolutely be okay with that. He would be okay with that. So yeah, I mean, just that scene alone was like, that was the contrast for me. Was like, this is how you do it, people. This is how she can be emotional. And she's had episodes in season 6 and 7 where she's screaming, where she's having a range of emotions. It's not just this like simpering kind of an airhead, because you're like, why are you crying at the drop of a hat? It's like she always has a reason. She has a reasonable like reaction.
Right.
Love her too. And I love that. Data or season 7 Troi, I can get behind that.
She's still an F, but she's a full rounded person.
Yes.
She's more complex. And I also think it has to do with the story arc that she worked out some issues she had with her parents. So there's some, I also love Lwaxana Troi, sorry, but they had some great episodes where she kind of put her foot down and said, I'm going to be my own person, to her mom. She went back and kind of had a time of reconciliation with her memories of her dad. And I think a lot of us have gone through that in our lives, and we can kind of come out the other side as still loving and appreciating our parents, but also feeling more free to be ourselves.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely love that. So going into this episode, what were your initial thoughts on this week's episode?
Well, I remember being confused by this episode.
Totally.
I don't follow plots well. Like, I'm the person at the movies going like, oh wait, why did he just punch that dude? Or wait, I thought she was a sister.
And I'm like, Grandma, just watch the episode.
Exactly. You would not want to go to movies with me.
That's
and
my
now
mom.
I'm like, oh,
who is he?
For the
Why is he wearing that jacket?
Button. Yeah.
That's my mom. Let me tell you, sorry to interrupt, but real quick. So my mom is like that sometimes, but her husband is like that all the time. And for some strange reason, don't ask me why, they were watching Avengers Endgame together. And which, if you've never seen Avengers Endgame...
Did they watch any of the others?
My mom did. My mom and my brother, like all of us
But her husband didn't.
Right. Me, my mom, my brother, my nephews, my cousins, we would always go see the new Avenger movie. It was like a family thing, but he never went. So he's watching Endgame. having seen maybe like Captain America and Hulk once. So the whole movie, he's driving her crazy going, who's she? Who's he? Who's that? Who's Thanos? Why is Thanos trying to kill everybody? Why does he have magic power? Why is he flying? Oh my gosh. Endgame is not the movie for you, bro. It's not the movie for you. It's got 1,000 characters. If you have not seen movies 1 through 21, don't see movie 22.
Yeah. That was me literally. And I had seen the movies going into it. So in terms of this episode, like I was like, it wasn't my favorite episode at the time because most of the time I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And so I was really curious, okay, rewatching, am I still going to be confused or is it going to make sense now? I'll save that for later. The answer is no, it still didn't make sense. But I do really love the Worf, Deanna, Troy relationship storyline that they developed in season 7. So I do remember liking that part of the episode. Even though I'm kind of like, wait, now was it fake? Was it real? But I still like it. It's fun to watch. And most of all, I've been really curious whether you two would like this episode because it's a mystery, or whether you would hate it because there's all this weird fakey reality stuff. So I've just been kind of curious to see your reactions. I'm now kind of leaning toward you're going to hate it, but we'll see.
Shereese, why don't you start?
Yeah, I actually like this episode. I've always liked this episode. And I like it because it's a mystery. So you totally nailed me on that one. It feels like a murder mystery, which I think is so interesting. And you don't know what's going on until like literally the last scene, but it doesn't feel like a MacGuffin. It doesn't feel like you're stringing me on. And at the end, I'm so disappointed. It feels like they're unraveling something. And at the end, you're like, oh, okay. I mean, Andrea said off mic that it was a kind of flimsy explanation, but it worked for me. I was like, but okay. Okay, it tracks. So I actually really liked it. I liked the mystery. I will agree with you, Heidi. It's confusing, but mysteries are often confusing because they show you clues out of order. You know, they keep information from you. They want you to figure it out, but not too quickly. So the one thing I do remember about this episode, because I didn't remember it beat for beat, I just remember the kind of overall feeling and what happened at the very end. The one thing that I always think of with this episode is the Troy and Worf love story and how it just felt so random. And it still feels random to me. Like seeing it again, I was just like, where did this come from? Where is this going? It just felt kind of like, and I'll get to the point when they actually make out. I was thinking to myself, this is what I thought as an adult. As a kid, I don't know what I thought, but as an adult, I was just like, I wonder how awkward this is. These two have been friends for like 7 years, like coworkers. I cannot imagine making out with my coworker of 7 years in front of cameras. Ugh. So that was the one, like kind of like
the behind the scenes of the actors themselves, not the characters.
Yes, the actors. Yeah, how they were probably like, oh, hey, today's the day. Yeah. Woo! We got to make it look real, you know?
Yeah.
Anyways, all right, Andrea, your thoughts.
Well, I thought my initial thoughts are it's an interesting idea, like this murder mystery in space, which is I do love a murder mystery. But I thought the episode going into it, I remember the episode being kind of dumb overall. Like I never really rewatched this one because it's like a fake reality or like it's like a hallucination. It's a dream, but not as stupid as a dream. Like it makes there's like you know, there aren't like crows like flying through the ship and then suddenly somebody turns into a fucking crow and Troy is a goddamn cake. Can't get over how stupid that is. But like this one makes more sense where it's like you don't. Oh my gosh. Damn that episode. Okay, so but
I also like that episode.
The hallucination, thank you, Shereese. The hallucination, though, makes more sense. Like it sort of follows like the rules of like the universe. So you don't know it's a hallucination until later. It just feels like Troy is kind of losing her mind a little bit, which I also don't enjoy the losing your mind stuff, which I know, Shereese, you do, but she's very out of character the way she feels like jealousy about Worf and stuff, where I'm like, girl, you and Riker have been knocking boots like casually and also are each other's imzadis throughout all 7 seasons. But when you all are dating each other, you're very supportive and happy for each other. And now you made out with Worf and slept with him one time and suddenly you're super jealous. Like this doesn't track with how her personality goes. But I will say, I will fast forward to final thoughts. It's not as dumb as I remember. Like it was better than I remember. But Heidi, I'm with you. It is confusing because it's really hard to know like when she slips into the hallucination, because there's a few times she's in front of that plasma stream and feels like overwhelmed, and then she like pulls back, and then she goes back and feels overwhelmed and pulls back. So I'm like, which one of those is the start of the hallucination? It's like it's tough to know. But yeah, so that's my initial thought on this. Let's just jump right in. We jump into Red Alert, which I love. You're like right in the middle of the action. Starboard Nacelle 2 is losing containment. Plasma injectors can't be shut down. Worf is crawling up the Jeffries tube with Riker to figure out how to stop this cascade effect.
Such a cool scene, by the way. They're climbing like really, really fast. And somehow they did the cameras. I don't know if they did these Jeffries tubes really short, like really narrow, because both of those men are freaking giants.
They're huge.
But you just see them like, deck within the space of like 45 seconds. And you're like,
and the
oh
music
gosh,
is
this
like
is
dun, 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 dun. Yeah, it's so
like, this
good.
is bad. This is bad news. And you hear Picard say, we may need to jettison the warp core. And you're like, uh-oh, that can't be good. That definitely can't be good.
I was checking the stream to make sure that this was actually the beginning of the episode. Because I thought,
me
did
too.
I by accident?
Me too. I buffered all the way back to 0, and I was like, oh no, this is where we start. Because, you know, Paramount Plus, I love you for all the Trek, but there are so many kinks you need to work out, okay, on the site. So sometimes it will just start in the middle of an episode, and I'm like, no. And then I'll have to like take the buffer, the buffer, and like go all the way back. But yeah, I did the same thing too, Heidi. I was like, are we at 000 right now? Which I love. It gave me that same feel as the episode where they're caught in the loop, the time loop, where like the ship is destroyed and then it starts again. Where I was like, whoa, this kind of has that same feeling. Now they get to the nacelle room, and this man with very cool alien makeup, it's like very subtle, but still beautifully done. He's standing in front of the nacelle, and a woman is like, he's up like a little ladder. It's kind of like it almost feels like a bunk bed if a bunk bed was made into a room. There's like an upper level and a lower level with a little rickety ladder you go up and down. And this woman is on the lower level, and she's like, he's locked out controls. I don't know how to shut this down. I'm afraid if I get close to him, he's going to jump through to
which Riker says, I'm good. And he climbs up. Riker's like, maybe you get too close, but if I get too close, I think it'll be fine. So he climbs up.
But this woman is like, I'm afraid if we get too close, he'll jump through the force field. And I went, pause. Now we can just jump through force fields? We've never been able to do that. The Borg were like banging on the force fields, not being able to get through. Roga, even Dana can't get through a force field. On this, you could just jump right through. I was like, come on.
They do, but they do explain. Yes, they do explain later on when Worf is with Troy in the room. He says, and she says, "Can you open the door for me?" He says, "I can open it, but only for 90 seconds because after that, the plasma will vent because the force field's going to degrade." So it sounded like the force field goes away, which is like, okay, why would it do that?
But safety oversight, by the way.
Yeah, can we just Can we put another force field or maybe glass? Do we need?
Can we get like a handrail? Can we
just get a handrail? The bottom.
The warning was saying containment field. So is there a different? Like, are there different kinds of force fields? Because like a two-way mirror. So maybe this is a containment field is a force field that works in one direction.
Yeah, I don't really know, because when they have a containment field,
that's a great thought.
Something that might explode, and they have it in engineering right next to the warp core for some strange reason. They'll throw up a little containment field around it, and if it explodes, no one gets hurt. So it seems, maybe it only holds the things in, but they could stick their hand in it at any time. I don't know. And I would feel better if when he jumps, which spoiler alert, he jumps. If when he jumps, there's not the little bzz sound of him going through a force field, because you're like, that doesn't make sense. I would prefer I would prefer them to just not have a force field and for them to say like, oh, it degraded because the door was open for too long and he locked the door open and that's why. Like, but no, jumping through a force field, that doesn't make any sense.
That's not a thing. Yeah, Riker does climb up.
Oversight.
He uses his "Hey, buddy, it's Will" voice to Dan. Again, that monster makeup is so well done. Dan says, and he seems like aware that Riker's there, but not fully. Yeah, he seems very out of it still. And Dan says, I didn't want to do it, but I saw them and they laughed at me. I know what I have to do. And Riker's like, Dan, no, like whatever it is, we can talk about this. You know, exactly the kind of thing you say to someone who's about to jump. You were like, it's we can work through it. It's not as bad as you think, you know. And he says a few times, I know what I have to do. I know what I have to do. And then he jumps through the force field, which is a no, and immediately is vaporized by the plasma. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so triggering. I personally don't know anyone who has died through suicide, but to anybody who has lost a loved one or has witnessed something like that, it's like I was shocked that they even
It
put
was shocking.
that. It was very shocking.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
So yeah, this whole thing was completely unnecessary and triggering and awful. However, I will say, on a positive note, this room is gorgeous. This set is gorgeous. Like the fact that we get a new space in the Enterprise so late in the show, I was really excited about this. But yeah, I totally agree with you. That part where he just jumps, you're like, wait, I thought, especially being in Trek, you think they're going to save them. They're going to grab them at the last second. There's going to be some rescue, but there was zero rescue.
How many times has a shuttle exploded and 4 minutes later they're able to lock on their pattern and beam them to safety? Like, this is what I was thinking. I will say this, though. He really did choose the quickest, most painless way possible, where it's like you jump into a plasma stream and you just evaporate and you instantly.
Disappear.
Yeah, where I was like, I guess, if we're trying to find a silver lining anywhere in this horrible stuff. But yeah, you're right. The room was gorgeous. And in later scenes, when the plasma stream has been turned off, but they're like in the tube, I was like, wow, they did such a beautiful job. Such a beautiful job. Now, in the ready room, Riker and Worf.
Can I backtrack to that just a little bit? Because I was thinking about the whole time that Riker was trying to talk him down. I was thinking about, the alternate endings. I was like, just stun him. Get an angle where you can stun the guy and
he falls backwards.
And then just like, football tackle him so that he doesn't fall forward. The end.
And in future, let's not have this be a force field. Let's go ahead and make this a window. We can just look through it if we need to look through it. Why do we need to look through it? We have sensors, but if you really have to put your eyeballs on it, we can do that with a big window. There's no reason we need a force. Are we throwing things in? What do we need this to open for?
This was the 90s. They didn't have seatbelts, so of course they're not going to have safety windows. But
this is true. No handrails. No handrails.
I'm also
anywhere.
Thinking to myself, why did they not call the person who was trained for dealing with these kind of situations?
Yeah.
Why would they call Riker and not Troy?
Yeah.
Yes. I was glad that they established that Riker knew this guy, so it wasn't just like, oh, he's a stranger we've never seen before. So they're trying to set up stakes and trying to set the connection. But wouldn't this be traumatizing for Riker because he's trying, but he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to say. So
this really would be this really would be a Troy situation. I get sending Worf because he locked out the whatever, and they need to jettison the warp core, and it's like a big security thing. Riker being there just doesn't really make any sense either.
Yeah, and I also thought even along the lines as you, Heidi, even without the stunning, Riker could be like, hey, I need you to look at me, look at this thing I'm doing, and have Worf come around behind him and just tackle him. Just tackle him, get him to safety. Okay, you strain his shoulder or something, whatever. Beverly can reset that in 2 seconds. But the main idea is that he's fine. And then when we find out at the end why he did this, it's like, what a waste of a life, too. That is just so sad.
Yeah.
So now in the ready room, Riker and Worf are filling in Picard and Troy as to what happened, and they're completely shocked by this suicide. And Troy saw him about 6 weeks ago during the crew evaluations, which, was the Lower Decks episode, and he was really positive. And Riker had a positive interaction with him just the other day. He complimented Dan Kwan on some work that he had done, and Kwan was so stoked that Riker had even noticed. And Picard does have this sort of somber moment where he says, as a captain, it is in the course of duty that I've had to notify many families that their sons and daughters were killed in the line of duty, but never because of a suicide. So I want a full investigation so that I can offer his family some further information to give them some solace as to what led to this decision. But I was like, also, hold on, you should be doing a full investigation anyway, not just because let's give the family more information. But it was really, really sad. And then here's a moment that I was like, this is kind of weird. Picard gives Troy authorization to go through the crew logs to get some information to see if they can find what they're looking for. And I was like, she's the ship's counselor. Doesn't she automatically sort of have clearance to
I think we've established many times on the show that HIPAA does not exist, and there is no such thing as privacy or security at all in Starfleet. So I don't really think she needed permission. I think anyone, I think if any of us were on the ship, we could access his personal logs, his medical history, anything about him, and he could do the same for us. I think it was more as part of the investigation or something like that. But yeah, the thing about I give you permission, it's like, come on, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter that she's being the ship's counselor, she should have access to like medical, like to whatever stuff. But like, they all have access to everybody's stuff. Nothing's a big secret. They just want to know like why this happened so that they can tell the family something, so that they can tell themselves something, especially since there were no clear signs. I think this whole scenario would have been different if he had been depressed, if he had been showing signs of a mental unrest, and Troy had noticed for months and hadn't done anything, or the treatments hadn't worked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then this happened where no one's shocked, right?
Well, I was watching this with my daughter, who is actually like a film studies media major. And so she's like really zeroed in on critiquing shows, which was really awesome, because so half the things I say, she probably came up with first. But she pointed out that when people are suicidal, it's a common that once they've made up the decision and a plan, then they often go through a period of actual relative calm and peace. And so it may look to everyone else like they're better now. You know, they're not, they don't look depressed. They look like they're ready to move on with their life. But actually they're just, that sense of resolve has taken over. And she's like, wouldn't Counselor Troy know this? Like, aware of that.
They did mention that later on in the episode, where maybe that's the calm before the storm, you know?
Yes.
However, even in that scenario, there are things that lead up to the calm.
Right. And they established that she had been talking to him for over time and hadn't noticed anything. And I was glad that they did that, just so that people understand and learn to recognize that.
Yeah. And so later on, I mean, there's a scene in engineering, but just skipping ahead a little bit because we're on this topic. Later on, when they go to Dan's quarters, everything just looks like normal quarters. With someone who is considering suicide, their homes don't usually look just like normal. Sometimes if it's a traumatic event, like maybe they lost a child or something horrible, which has spiraled them down into depression, you see like a before and an after in their home. There are spots of their home that's like tidy and perfection, and there are spots that are completely messy, and you can trace it back to the trauma, and you can see like the areas traced back to the trauma. Like, for example, maybe the area with like the wills and the deeds and the documents is all neat and tidy and organized, but everything else is a mess. You know, it's like there are still signs, and there were no signs. So the fact that he was calm before he jumped could be, yes, he was suicidal, but that's why they're doing this investigation. And as they go to the investigation, they're like, but there are no other signs. Right. It's kind of like, you know, on TV, people are always like, oh, they left a note. But they're like, most suicides don't actually leave a note. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, yeah, you need more than a note. You need a lot of things to be like, yes, this is probably what happened, and this is why. And as they're doing this investigation, there's absolutely no reason. This guy is happy. He's healthy. He seems well adjusted. He's excited about life. Turns out he has a girlfriend. So he's got support. You know, he's got like emotional support. He's got a job he loves. Like there's just no reason. So
it is really like very, very mysterious.
It's very out of the blue.
It's very out of the blue, and it doesn't line up with anything. There are no indicating factors that point to this is what led to this suicide. Even like when they go into his quarters and like look at his last log from this morning, he's like, I can't wait to spend time with Maddie. You know, it's been a lot of work, and now I get to have some downtime, and I can't wait to see her after my shift today. And he was all like Mr. Chipper. Nothing like this sort of ethereally kind of out of it, but determined,
this pensive
jumper. And where he's like, I know what I have to do. It's like, what the heck?
And he was making plans. Like, he was making plans he's excited about. And people who already know, like, I'm going to take my life today at noon, don't make plans for dinner.
There's no dinner plans.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So he just seems really happy and chipper, which for us as the viewers, we're like, this is weird. This is just kind of weird. Like, it's a weird topic. It's a weird episode. And we're like, okay. So next thing you know, and I kind of skipped the scene in engineering, but Data and Geordi kind of have this conversation about suicide and some kind of moral of the story conversations that they have going into it. But I think this whole episode is kind of a peeling apart at those layers and what could lead someone down that road. And in sickbay, we see Troy is talking to the girlfriend, Ensign Calloway, which at first I was like, why did they go to sickbay? And turns out she works there.
Can I just say, I'm sorry for interrupting, but that scene where they show Data Geordi crosses his arms, and then
Data
does
crosses
the
his arms.
same thing. I'm like, wow, they put that in there. I mean, they interrupted this like after school special conversation to show Data trying to like awkwardly adjust,
trying to use body language. Yeah. I love it when they do that. They did that before when he had the episode where he like had the emotions from the Borgs, from like the emotions chip, and he was like Geordi, like, how do you know when you are angry or something like that? And he was like, I just feel it. And he like shook his hands, and then Data was like, I too just feel it, and shook his hands the same way. And it was just like so cute.
I love when he does the like, he's Pinocchio trying to be a real boy. It's really cute.
It's really
cute. Here is a scene that I actually had a problem with. When Troy goes to sickbay to speak with Maddie Calloway, who works in sickbay, she was Dan Kwan's girlfriend. She's in shock and can't believe he's gone. And I understand that people grieve different ways, right? There's no one size fits all for grief. But I feel like Star Trek does not do justice to grief. Mm-hmm. They don't do grief well. Mm-hmm. Beverly was a hot ass mess after that ghost sex episode. But here, Maddie is like so calm about Dan finding out he just committed suicide like 45 minutes ago. Yeah. And I feel
remember how calm Beverly was when Wesley was kidnapped with all the other kids?
Yeah, I was like, what the hell?
Okay, well, let's go try to figure out how to get him back. You're like, what parent would ever be this casual about kidnapping?
I think that's still like a remnant of like leftover ghost image from like Gene Roddenberry, who was like, everybody only feels positive emotions, which is like so not realistic. But the behavior, the way she's talking to Troy about Dan is like what you would expect from someone who like lost someone like a few months ago, right? She talks about him in the past tense, which is not normal when you find out someone you know and love has just died, where you're like, no, they always come home at 6 p.m. He's coming home at 6.
I just talked to him this morning. Yeah.
Yeah. Where she's like, I remember he always used to bring me flowers. That was so sweet. I was like, huh? This I
feel like it's more really, how you would talk about like a friend.
Really weird.
Who moved to a different state like 6 years ago, or maybe a different country, and they don't have like cell phone or internet, and so you haven't talked to them because they're in the Peace Corps or something like that. It's more like that's the conversation where it's somebody who's alive and well, but you just can't talk to them, and you just have such great memories. You're right. That's exactly how she was.
Like I lost like,
my boyfriend this morning.
I don't think she was that into you.
Yeah,
she is just really 100%. Well adapted.
100%, where she's just like, gosh, I remember we used to do long walks on the beach. He loved that. He just died 40 minutes ago. This is not, it just, I mean, and I get shock is one thing where you could like not be really emotive, right? But usually that's like, you become sort of like non-expressive.
Right.
She's just chatting. Yeah,
it was like a pleasant chit chat. Like, well, gosh, thanks for coming by, counselor. This was great. What?
She said this whole setup, the whole first part of the show reminded her of a Law and Order episode.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah. Law and Order episodes, which, as you know, I love me a good crime drama. So I have seen quite a few of those where people just are like, oh, poor Jimmy. Like he just died a brutal, awful death last night. And they're like, poor Jimmy. Yeah, I really, we're going to miss him. I don't know what we're going to do with his bedroom. Oh, excuse me, I have a call. And you're like, this is his mom?
Yeah.
You died this morning. This is the emotion. Is everything okay? Like, what kind of... Yeah. And I didn't even pick up at all on the fact that her affect was completely off. But you're right. I think if they were to redo this scene today, a better version, if we want to keep the same dialogue, would be for her to give it in this deadpan, like numb way.
Yes, like, she's numb.
Brought me flowers. He did, something where she's just like, I can't believe this is real. Or even for her to say,
yes,
I can't believe, or a tear, a frown. She was smiling. She had her makeup done, her hair done. Girl,
she looked good.
Girl, if you are in grief, you don't have time to be combing your hair because you are just too busy, like, focusing on other things.
Well,
but
I mean, even with that though, it's like she could have woken up this morning and gotten dressed and looked all cute for her duty in sickbay and then get the news. So it's like you still look cute, but like, just the shock, that pale something. This was just like, oh, hey, counselor. Oh, he died. Oh, wow. I can't believe it. Oh my gosh. Well, if I think of anything, I'll let you know, but thank you for coming by. I was like, huh? It just, the whole thing sound weird. Now, Troy does go to the nacelle room to get a feel for the space, which is something Troy would totally do. And she's a little bit startled by Lieutenant Nara, who kind of sneaks up on her. She's like, "Can I help you with anything?" And Troy's like,
"Oh my gosh, this reminded
okay.
me so much of that scene from Young Frankenstein, where the Fraulein keeps coming up behind him, and every time she does, he just jumps."
Yeah, just like total jump scare. I know. I was like, okay. Now, Maddie Calloway does say that like Lieutenant Nara was Dan's direct supervisor, and he kind of clashed with her at times. And so Troy is like, well, let me dig into that a little bit. And so Nara's like, well, it is a shame. He was such a good man. Like, you know, he knew the ship better than anyone, probably because he was part of the ship's building at Utopia Planitia, which I really love that name. I know some people don't, but I really love it.
Who doesn't love that name? Why wouldn't you love this name?
Jeffrey made a remember Jeffrey was like, I hate that name. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I forgot because the name is so cool.
Sorry, Jeffrey. We really do
love you, Jeffrey, and the name.
I know. We love you, Jeffrey, and we love the name. Exactly. Now, Lieutenant Nara does tell Troy, like, yeah, we didn't get along at first because Dan often had like a ton of new ideas about how to run things. And
yeah, like, and she said some were good, but some were less good. Here's a question I have. And she seems so cool. She did not seem like she did. You remember
I didn't get sketchy vibes from her.
You remember on Aquiel when it was like she was like, my boss is such a jerk or whatever, and then you're like, but is he the problem? Is he? And then you're like, I'm not sure, but there did seem
spoiler alert, he's not. Yeah,
but there did seem like a lot of tension. I thought that was good. This is going to be a repeat. But Lieutenant Nara seems totally cool. Like she was like, I appreciate some of his ideas. Some of them weren't great, but I love that he had them. She seemed like a really good boss. But here's the question that I had throughout this episode from this moment. Does this make sense that the people who helped build the ship also work on the ship? Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense to me.
I thought about that too.
Oh, you did see that?
Does that happen in real life? Do people build ships at a shipyard and then turn around and crew the ship? That feels like a different skill set.
Well, see, I didn't actually think anything of it because I thought, oh, he had a posting on Utopia Planitia working on the nacelles 8 years ago, and then 6 months ago got a different posting to a different ship that just happened to be the ship that he was working on when it was in the shipyard. Like, that was my thought. But Heidi, did you get a weird vibe from that at all, or does that strike you as odd?
I did too, although I guess I could imagine that if they were specialists, if he was like a nacelle specialist, and so he would go to work on a ship specifically to work with the nacelles, that would make sense to me. But in the show, they had like a number of people who worked, but then again, that was part of the freaky hallucination sequence. So maybe it was just one.
Yeah. But this part isn't though.
This part is not the hallucination.
This part is not the hallucination. So I don't know.
Actually did, but that makes sense to me if he's a nacelle specialist.
Yeah, okay, I'll buy that, because I was like, the person who builds literally anything, a rocket, a rocket scientist who builds rockets does not fly rockets. Like they don't get in the rocket.
I'm thinking too about like the Titanic, which was built in Ireland in a shipyard, and a bunch of the people who helped build it also were working the like shoveling the coal or whatever into the fire, to like propel the ship, and they died on the ship like when it sank. And so it's like they worked on the ship that they had helped build. So
yeah, I guess, but I'm also common. But I'm also thinking of like,
I don't know,
people who build airplanes don't fly the airplanes. I don't know. To me, like anything like that's a different, like an engineer who builds the thing is different from an engineer who like maintains the thing. Like someone who works on my car did not build my car.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm getting kind of Leah Brahm vibes off of this. Like, I built
totally.
I love
totally. She just swings aboard. Yeah, she just swings aboard to make sure Geordi's not effing it up too bad. Now, Troy does go up the ladder to the nacelle to look around, which is such a cool shot. And when she does, she gets this overwhelming, like dizzy, sick kind of feel. She's like, "Oh my god!" She like covers her mouth,
which I love. This right. This is Troy showing emotions in a way where she's not falling to pieces and crying. But she's showing lots of emotions, and you're like, what's going on?
Emotions, she's showing emotions and not thirsting after a man to like help her through those emotions, which I'm like, yes, thank you. Now she gets down, and Lieutenant Nara's like, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "I'm not sure." And in sickbay, again, HIPAA does not exist because Riker, Worf, Beverly, Picard, like everybody's just huddling over her.
Plus the comms are open, so everyone on the ship can hear the conversation, just so we're all on the same page.
Everybody's sipping their tea in their quarters, like, and then what happened, right?
The little bosun's whistle just went. Like, everybody listen up. Beverly's going to talk about Troy's personal medical information.
Yeah. Now, Troy says she felt a flood of negative emotions that overwhelmed her. So hatred, fear, disgust, like a lot of feelings. And Lieutenant Kwan was partially empathic. So perhaps empath sense these feelings in the nacelle, but like, why the nacelle in particular?
Echo. Yeah. I was like, is that really a thing?
I like it though.
Which I thought the term was so cool.
Yeah.
Wasn't that such a cool term?
Yeah.
And they said, could Dan's death have been an empathic echo? And I was like, now the birth of a new cool Trek term has just happened, right?
And
like, it's kind of like cellular residue of psychic.
Yes. And psychic cellular residue.
Troy being the expert in these things that she is, she goes, I don't think so. And I love that because she could be like, yes, that is what it was, right? But she's just like, I don't think so. No, that doesn't sound that doesn't sound legit. But I'm open to it. But I don't recall ever experiencing an empathic echo in the whole rest of my life. So I love that she's like the expert in this and everyone's respecting that. So Beverly's like, so Troy's like, I want to go back though, because I feel like now, big question marks are popping up all over my head. Something is going on in that exact spot where Dan was standing. There is some weird energy, emotion, something going on right there. I don't know what it is.
Something's
maybe
wrong.
That can help explain what happened. So I want to go back there and investigate. And Beverly's like, I don't recommend it. Your telepathic hormone levels are way too high. So wait a couple hours and I'll give you some injection of something to like dampen it or whatever. And then you can go back. And Riker's just like, I don't want you going alone doing this alone by yourself anymore because
looking out for her.
Yeah, exactly. So Worf is like, I will go. So you're like, okay, cool. We got a plan.
Also, Riker, why weren't you there too? I'm just saying. Why are you sending one person? And by the way, the one person is like, cool, I'll just be here downstairs while you're up there up by yourself. feeling all these psychic, where there was just a death, feeling all these like psychic residues. Yeah, I was like, okay. All right.
We don't want you to be totally alone. Like we want somebody to witness you, but we don't want you to be like totally supported either.
Computer, turn on cameras. Yeah, exactly. Now, Worf does go to visit Troy sometime later because Beverly's like, it's going to take about 13 hours to synthesize this like psychic blocker, basically. So she's like, okay, sounds good. I'm going to go to my quarters and just chill. And Worf comes to visit her, and everything she reads in Dan's log show that he was well-adjusted and positive. Like, this just doesn't make any sense. And so Troy kind of talks about how, empaths, like her grandfather didn't speak aloud at all. He only communicated telepathically.
I love hearing that backstory for Troy.
Yes.
It was really sweet.
It was so
really
beautiful.
sweet.
And old grandpapa was like, speaking out loud is only for off-worlders. Like we, and especially because they were kind of like betas out of royalty. It's like we only speak telepathically. And sometimes we'd seek visions in fire. And Worf talks about that like episode arc from way back when he's like, I too have sought visions in fire. And it was a little bit of like a bond for them. Talking about this
bonding.
And it was bonding over something other than like nacelles or like torpedo tubes, right? It was just personal history, friendship stuff. It was slice of life and really cute.
And Worf gives this line, that's one of my favorite lines. There are things we do not understand, yet they exist nonetheless.
I love the idea of that so much. Even in the 24th century, with all this technology, there are still things that can't be explained by science. And I love that. And Shereese, we talked about that, I think, last week or maybe the week before, about how like love is an emotion that we feel strongly. And yet there isn't quite there's a chemical explanation, but it's not really, it doesn't encompass all of what it is.
There's like a chemical explanation. There's a socialized explanation. There's a hierarchical explanation. There's an evolutionary explanation. But even if you put them all together, it still doesn't define it. It still doesn't explain it satisfactorily, at least in my opinion. And
agreed.
I think that's part of the human condition. That's what makes sentience so amazing, is that we don't understand everything about everything at all times, regardless of our technology and how much time we have to experience it. And another thing is that the beauty of sentience and being human is that we get to learn and develop. Like when you have a kid, like I've seen this with babies and it's so cute. When they have ice cream for the first time, that is a new experience. That is the first time when their little feet touch sand on a beach for the first time. It is brand new. It has never happened before for them. So even if it's an experience that could be explained with all of this technology or whatever, on the individual level, that doesn't matter. When you fall in love as an individual, the chemistry and science and social dynamics and whatever, doesn't matter. None of that matters.
Especially for the first time, falling in love for the first time. I think everybody remembers that because it's so profound, right? Like it's so all encompassing.
And the Troy Worf relationship it doesn't make sense. You can't understand it.
That's also a mystery.
But yet I think it's significant that it's after that line that he's like realizing, oh, this does exist for me. I have to deal with this now.
But like, just like how you said, like, you're a big T, you're a thinker, and your husband is the big F, the big feeler, right? That doesn't make sense to go together, and yet it does. It works, right? Where I think Worf and Troy are such polar opposites in their personality types, but they also complement each other in really lovely ways, where if anybody has gotten Worf out of like warrior mode into like philosopher mode, it's Troy. If anybody is going to soften Worf, it's always been Troy that like pulls out the softer side of Worf. And I really like that. And I love that this is the second time in this season that we've seen like a Troy Worf relationship. And I know that it's a relationship as a kid. I was like, this doesn't make any sense, but I actually quite like it because they complement each other very well. And there's so much of a backlog of like years of respect and trust built up that they have that for each other.
They co-parented. And so that is a bond that's just special and unique.
It
trust
is
somebody enough with your kid.
Yeah, and she loves his kid genuinely. And how many people on the ship can say that? Exactly. And her mom, like her mom, that's like her best friend is that kid. So
I know
that alone is like, you know, if I had kids, that alone would be like, I think we mentioned this on our last episode with David White, where I was like, I don't have kids, but if I had kids, someone loving my kids the way I love my kids would be a huge attraction factor.
Exactly.
But regardless of anything else about them, that would be like 60% of my equation would be that, where I'd be like, wow, well, they love my kids. So let's figure out what else about them I need to like, because that part I'm like totally in, you know? Anyway, so they have this sweet moment. And after that statement, Worf gets this weird look in his eye and he's like, I gotta go. And he runs away and he goes to 10.
Yeah. he starts getting in his feels. Yeah. And did you notice when he excuses himself, he's like, would you look at the time? Deanna seems a little sad that he's leaving.
She's like, oh, you're leaving. You don't have to. It's cool.
We were just having this bonding moment.
Yeah.
But he gotta go.
He, you know, as I think is not such an alien topic to most men, you start catching feelings for someone and they're like, I need to be left alone for a little bit to think about what this is, right? So he goes to 10 forward and he sees Riker on a date with someone. And this scene was so funny. And I think that Star Trek, especially TNG, does comedy in such a subtle way that it's not a comedy show, but there are very light moments where you're like, that was so silly. It was great. Worf very clumsily tells Riker that he's so like, awkward. He's so awkward. He's like, oh, I see you're on a date with Lieutenant whatever her name is, and he's like, I think so, like, and I think it's going well, and Worf is so clumsy that Riker's like, are you also interested in her? Is that what you're trying to say? He's like, no, I would never, but if I did want to pursue someone that you were dating or had dated, I would discuss it with you first. And Riker's like, are you okay? Like, you sound like you're asking permission to date my sister. And Riker is like full blown off duty, 2 cocktails in Riker. And I love
he's about to hit that deep V-neck any second.
He is, girl. I was about to say he's about a second away from a silk deep V-neck. Okay. And that cute lieutenant. Okay. Like he was like Mr. Loosey Goosey, charming Riker. He's about to play that trombone, girl. It was so lighthearted and funny. I was like, come back. I want to see more of you.
Yeah, it was great. And Worf is and then Riker goes, is there anyone in particular that you are asking me about?
No.
And Worf's like, no, nothing. No. Goodbye. Leaves his prune juice right there on the counter and storms out of 10 forward. And you're like, and Riker's just smiling after him. All right. Good talk.
He's like, that was weird.
My daughter is like, are Riker's eyes really that blue?
Yes.
Yes.
They really are. Jonathan Frakes. We owe that man so much. Oh my God. Also, you know, he's not in his 30s anymore because, you know, this was like 30 something years ago. He's still a total knockout. He's like a silver really fox now. I'm not trying to objectify you or anything, but also like, good Lord. It shouldn't be legal to be this good looking. Like, he's such a good looking guy. But so many of the cast members have like aged like fine wine. Like LeVar Burton. Holy shit, he looks so he's more
attractive now than he was then. Yeah. And he was always cute, but as like a grandpa, oh my gosh, he doesn't look like a grandpa.
Yeah, he needs to wear a deep V-neck all the time, in my opinion.
Put on that silk asymmetrical, like, go ahead, wrap it around. it meets at your belly button, just like Picard's crazy Ryza outfit.
The Starfleet resort wear leaves something to be desired, but okay.
And that something is fabric.
One episode where the guys, where it was like the woman was the matriarch, and the guys,
where Riker had his deep V.
Oh my God.
He had his like ballerina outfit on.
Ooh, that looked uncomfortable.
So wrapped around.
I'd be so cold. I would be so cold.
But
you're so cold. You're so cold anyway.
That's what I'm saying. I'd be so cold.
Let me ask you a question though. Did it bother you that Riker seemed so unaffected by having just witnessed this traumatic suicide?
No, because do you remember the episode when Picard? Do you remember the episode? It was called where no one has gone before, something like that, where they went to like the edges of reality and like their thoughts became real. With the Traveler. There was this guy, Picard turned the corner and this guy was on fire. Like his arm was on fire. And Picard's like, men, figure it out. Like, put the fire out in your mind. Yeah. And then so the fire goes out instantly and the guy's like panting, he's sweating, he's freaking out. And Picard's like, now get back to your station. Like 0 time for recovery, reflection, like healing, whatever. It's get back to work. So for me, I'm like, oh yeah, this tracks. They're
right back on duty.
They never spend more than a good 30 seconds grieving or mourning or like.
But this was his
having a big trauma.
Time. I mean,
you're right. This was just a couple hours later, right? Like the dude committed suicide this morning, and now it's like 8 hours later, and he's like on a date.
This is how they always are. Now, if this was real life, yes, I feel like he should maybe be sad. But take like on the show, they always are like, oh yeah, I mean, it happens.
Right. Now before we go any further, I do have a question. Is Troi in the hallucination now?
No.
Okay. How do we know that though? Because the next time she goes up there, she like hallucinates that she's like on Utopia Planitia and then she's like back on the Enterprise. But it's like, wait,
I had the same question.
Right. It's really tough to tell because I'm like, is this the one? Because she and Worf now have this little connection, which they did not have before. Is this a hallucination? Or is the next time that's where I'm like,
okay. So here
it's so seamless. It's tough to tell.
Yeah, it was really, really well done. But also it's a mystery. So it's supposed to be confusing. But in the next scene, we're back in the nacelle tube. And oh my gosh, I just wrote my notes. I love seeing this room from every different angle. Like they use the crap out of this set.
So many great scenes.
They're like right, left, up, down, and every angle. I'm like, ooh. What else is over there? Like everything's
even
so cool.
The bulkheads are freaking cool. You're like, oh my God.
You know, the part that I love the most was they put in the sound effect of metal, like every time they took a footstep. They had these like metal footsteps, and I was like, "Oh,
like
that
metal clinking."
That does it for me. That's
like
so
a
great.
Klingon ship sort of set where it's like you're always on like a Jeffries tube or like a high catwalk, and it's that clanking. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm one of these people that if I'm in a building and there's like a nameplate that says boiler room, I always want to peek inside. Like, ooh, show me the guts. Show me what's happening behind the scenes. And that's one. Girl,
you're a natural born engineer.
Yeah, I'd probably like that because boiler rooms are hot. So I'd probably be like, ooh, warm and toasty. But so here's why I think this is where the hallucinations start. For one, it's because this is literally where the hallucination starts. But when she comes back to this room with Worf and she goes up on the catwalk and she asks Worf to open the door, right before he opens it, he says, just so you know, I can only leave the door open for 90 seconds before the force field degrades. So I can only open it up for a little bit and then I'm going to close it. And she's like, cool. At the very end of the episode, he grabs her and goes, Troi, what are you doing? And then when they're in the ready room, she says, wow, I can't believe that happened during that 90 seconds. So this is the moment where hallucination starts. Everything from this point forward is all part of the hallucination.
Oh, so Worf's attraction to her
happens before the hallucination.
So it's real.
Yes. But when I was first watching this, I wasn't sure because it was like, oh, at first I thought, just like you did, that this was part of the hallucination. I felt so cheated.
Like she turned away and she was like, oh my God,
all of this stuff about her grandfather and this moment with Worf, like, oh, that never happened. And then I went back and I rewatched it again. And that's the only time I noticed, like on the second rewatch, recently, what you just said, that, they had the voice, the warning, the containment field. So it wasn't that first one, it was the second one.
Oh, it's the second.
But I felt so cheated when I first did hallucination because I thought that was not part of it. That
kind of like
in
Parallels, right? In Parallels where they have all these like moments and they're married and they have kids and everything else. And then it's like, psych, none of that happened. You guys are just good friends.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well, I kind of like that whole, we've got kids. It's kind of cute.
Yeah. Like I do really enjoy the fact that like they do have a little bit of a bonding moment even before the hallucination starts. Right. So they go back to the scene of the suicide, and yeah, Worf does open like the blast doors, and Troy starts to have these empathic flashes of a murder where a woman's like, no, get away from me, which is totally terrifying.
Yeah, and that's hard pass. That's what I'm like, I'm good. Let's get another telepath in here.
Let's just get a level 1 diagnostic on this bad boy and see what we can find. Now, she suddenly is like snapped back to like the shipyard on Utopia Planitia, and she's like, Worf, hello? And I do love
the plasma stream is off. There's like wires everywhere, cords everywhere.
Very, very raw.
Thank God the stairs are built.
Right. She hears some laughing and goes to investigate, and it's 2 people caught making out. And the woman realizes they're caught, and she kind of looks annoyed, like, ugh. But then the guy starts laughing, and the woman starts laughing too. And weirded out, like Troy starts like backing away and bumps into a man who looks at her like really creepy. And suddenly she's back in the right place. And Worf is like, are you all right? And she's like, what the hell was that?
So it turns out she hallucinated while she was up on the catwalk and came down the catwalk still hallucinating, and walked around still hallucinating, which is
she had a hallucination
terrifying.
Within the hallucination. It's inception here.
Yeah.
So she tells the senior staff, like, what did I see? Maybe, totally. It was this empathic echo. Was she seeing that scene through someone else's eyes? Maybe there was another man there too. He was staring at her really fucking intensely. Whoever they cast for that role, he did such a good job at being like creepy, intense man.
He's like the definition of creepy. That man needs to be in a movie as a serial killer.
Definite serial killer vibes. Yeah.
100% does a killer job with that. Beverly suggests that empathic inhibitor. She's like, it's gonna take. Is this the one where she says it's gonna take a while? No, why do I have that in my notes?
No, I have that too. It says it's gonna take like 16 hours for her to make it. So I think before Beverly just said, take 3 or 4 hours before you go back to let your numbers come back down. But yeah, before Beverly had actually said, take 3 or 4 hours before you go back so that your telepathic hormone levels can come back down.
Like your telepathic cortisol levels, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at
they
this
have like a
point,
name for it, yeah.
They did. At this point, though, she's like, okay, so now we know that every time you go back, your level spikes so high that now you're walking around hallucinating. We need to step this up. So then she's like, that's when she says, I'm going to make a compound for you to suppress something, so you can go back and keep investigating without being overwhelmed and without seeing visions. So
she did not have the whatever when she
did not. She just had taken a few hours of a break to like let her levels go back down. But she knows like this is the key. That's why she keeps being like, I need to go back. But honestly, like if I just saw somebody, I guess she doesn't know that she's being murdered, but it seems kind of obvious that this lady is terrified. Yeah. She's backing up. She's cringing. She's saying, no. She's falling on the ground. Whatever's about to happen is bad news. And I would not want to see this vision. And I would be like, where's my counselor in training? like I need to talk to somebody myself after seeing this. We need
100%.
We need a Vulcan or something to be in this piece, because like they could do what I'm doing too. And they would have, they would be able to control their emotions while seeing this horrible vision.
Right. Now on the bridge, Worf comes to meet with Deanna. She's working at like the little science station. He's like, I'm sorry for being late. I was on guard duty for this transport of chemicals to some station we didn't give any fucks about at all.
Nope.
But she's looking through the computer, and she's like, I asked the computer to give me a rundown of everybody who worked on the ship at Utopia Planitia and serves aboard the Enterprise, which I was like, how many people could that be? Like 5, 6, So
and in my world, 0.
Yeah, right.
Because they're not the same people.
The computer's like, I'm sorry, that's not a real thing. So nobody.
They're still at Utopia Planitia.
They do find it's this guy, Lieutenant Walter Pierce. Even his like, I want to say mugshot, but his like
profile
ID
picture
photo is so freaking creepy too. So they go to main engineering and they talk.
He does have a serial killer profile picture,
right? Totally. So they're like, "Did you work with Lieutenant Quall in the nacelle room?" And he exchanged with him, and that was less than pleasant. And he's like, "I don't know. It was like 8 years ago. I'm sure I worked with everybody in every room at some point because we were building the ship."
But see, the way Andrea is saying it is like how a normal person would say it. Like, I don't know. Maybe I worked with like hundreds of people. I don't know.
Yeah,
he says
that
it
was
like
my way.
He says it like, I don't know. I worked with many people.
Possibly.
Perhaps. Who can recall? It's like so
voice.
Yeah, he's got the serial killer voice where you're like, okay. Like I would be getting the heebie-jeebies talking to this man. Like
100%.
I would be like,
I would have been giving him like the inhibitor to be like, I'm just going to inhibit your creepiness so you can talk like a normal freaking person.
But Troy does threaten him at one point and is just like, you realize that I can tell when someone's telling the truth or not, right? And he's like, that's very good for you. You know, and she's just like,
yeah, that was like, ugh.
If you remember anything in the future, you're going to let us know, aren't you? And he's like, why,
here's our card.
Yeah, here's our card. Exactly. And then she walks out.
It just says Enterprise on it.
It says Troy Enterprise. Yeah. That's it. Because all you have to do is say her name and you can automatically connect there.
Riker's is a little jazzier. He's got a trombone on his, but that's about it.
That's his logo. And as she walks out of like the turbo lift with Worf, she's like, but the truth is, I can't read him at all, which means he must have some telepathic ability. Mm-hmm. And Worf is like, but he's human.
Maybe he can block her.
Yeah, but he's human. How can he have telepathic ability? And she's like, I really don't know. So now we're like, okay, we've got this creep
with this.
Mm-hmm.
When he's like, I have played poker with you all this time, and I didn't know you were bluffing. She's like, yeah, isn't that the point?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. She's a little bit sassy. She's a little bit
like,
flirty.
If you knew, that would ruin the whole fun.
That wouldn't be the point. Yeah. Now they go to her quarters to keep working, but the report is going to take 30 minutes to compile, which I was like, again, what the hell is happening with Enterprise systems?
It's breaking
Last
down.
week it took 39 hours to scan one comet. Now it takes 30 minutes to compile a thing. Beverly's going to take 16 hours to create an inhibitor, which she could be like, done.
Okay.
Like, that's
getting
tired,
hallucination time. So
inception
time.
But still, they weren't doing Inception with the giant ice ball with the comet. Like, I felt the same way. I was like, 16 hours to synthesize a compound. Didn't you save the entire ship like 1,000 times with something you made in 10.2 seconds? And plus, you know what you're making. And all those other times, you didn't even know what the thing was you needed to make. You didn't even know what it was. You just made it up. At this point, you know exactly the compound. It's sitting in the computer under file 367.A.
Yes.
Like, boop, boop, come back. Matter of fact, don't even leave. I'm going to have this for you before you walk out the door. Yeah. And the 30 minutes to compile, why would it take 30 minutes to pull? I can open a Google Doc now. Like, I don't know. I just,
it takes 10 seconds to Google something.
But was the compound itself, was like its existence? Is that part of the hallucination?
Yeah, this is all in the hallucination.
So Dr. Crusher came up with the idea of this compound after she started the hallucination.
Yes, in the hallucination. Yeah,
okay.
which is crazy. But
why was it even necessary then? Like, what purpose did it serve in?
I guess it just made the story. It made the story for us as viewers seem more real, maybe, because that's something Beverly would do.
Yeah, and then Troy actually explains at the end of the episode that she, whatever this empathic echo was, had to incorporate things from her actual life.
Yeah.
So that she could follow along with the trail of, getting to the same ending that Quan got to. So it was incorporating her own memories, her own relationships, so in her conception of reality, this is exactly what would happen. They'd be in the ready room. They'd be in an observation lounge. Beverly would do a compound. Like, this is what would happen. So part of that's her feeding the narration from her subconscious. So it totally makes sense. What doesn't totally make sense is why this is going to take 30 minutes. But in any case, this is going to take 30 minutes. And so Worf is like, well, this is going to take some time, I guess. So maybe I should go. And Troy's like, yeah, maybe you should go. And they're like making eyes at each other.
He's cracking up through this whole scene. It's so middle school.
It is very middle school, but I also thought it was pretty true to life. And here's why. Because these two people have had one type of relationship the whole time they've known each other, just very professional relationship. And they serve together on this ship that's zipping around the ether. So if things get really awkward, they have to work together every day, and it's going to be super awkward. And like, there's no leaving the ship just because of that, right? It can't be like, well, I'll just be on my part of the bridge and you be on your part. It's like, it's a small space. So you're risking shifting the relationship into a romantic space where that's always a risk if you don't fully know how the other person feels, right? If you're not super sure. So it's like,
see, that's the thing. Know. She's an empath. She does know.
Oh, that's true.
And the other thing is that on this ship or in this day and age or in Starfleet or whatever, remember, they are extremely well adjusted when it comes to romantic relationships. So there's like no risk, because even if they hooked up 1,000 times and then they broke up, they would still be bestest of friends. Like nothing ever happened.
Well, that's
which
true. That is
completely unrealistic in my opinion, but they're always just like okay with it. But yeah, I do hear you on it being very awkward, but Worf ends up taking her hand and then kisses her hand, which is a very Klingon way to do it, and kisses her neck, which is super hot. And they just start making out. And that's when I put, how weird was this for the actors?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was very awkward.
As like characters, it plays well. Like it looks like they're really into each other. And nothing about that seemed weird. But as actors, I was just like, oh my gosh, were they like dreading this day because they've been really good friends and now they have to like make out all hot and heavy on camera? Or was it just like another day in the life? I don't know. I need to find the behind the scenes on this episode.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, that might be really interesting to find out. Like if they had an interview about like, oh my gosh, we've been friends for years. Like everybody, it seems like the senior crew, the actors who played the senior crew were all like really good, close friends, like family. So that probably would have been super weird. Now, the next morning, Worf is still in her quarters and Deanna's asleep and he kisses her awake. He kisses her awake and tells her that breakfast is ready. People, take note. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. If you spend the night with someone and have this little romantic night, you wake them up with kisses and you tell them that at least coffee, if not all breakfast, is ready. I was like,
I guess
where do I sign up for this?
I guess especially when you have replicators, because you don't even have to be a good cook or good at making coffee.
You don't have to do shit.
You don't need to know where
like a breakfast PB&J sandwich or something.
You don't need to know where they keep their dishes. You don't need to know any of that.
This was DoorDashed in 5 minutes ago, right?
Seriously,
you just go boop boop boop. You just say like make coffee the way she likes her coffee every day.
Yeah.
You just like
computer. Troy hot chocolate blend number 4.
Yeah, just chocolate something. Yeah. But don't you think, though, that this is inconsistent in one way with Worf as a lover? Because for Klingons, like violent, their sex is very physical. And you kind of see that just fast forwarding to DS9 when he's in a relationship with Jadzia Dax, which is like, I love that.
But it's a great
they're like always ending up in the medical bay the day after because they're just like, you just don't want to know. But
that sounds like a super fun time to me. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it sounds awesome.
It does not sound fun to me at all. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, if I end up in sick bay the next day, we did it wrong. Yeah. Well, it also think back.
So tender. He's so gentle.
Also with K'Ehleyr, right?
Fantasizing about him.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is
like
her
totally
fantasizing.
Not the way it would be if they really.
This is He like she unleashes the like softer side in him, and that's what comes out. But
because when he was with K'Ehleyr, they were like,
yeah,
that's definitely when
bleeding.
That's super hot.
Bleed
after him and K'Ehleyr slept together, like the moment they were done, and he was putting on his little ball drake or whatever, he's like starts giving the chant to be married. He's like, we had sex, let's get married. Of course, he's loved her for years and years and years, right?
Yeah.
But with this, it's just like, hey, honey, okay, see you later.
Good morning.
Yeah, it just was, there was
ready.
There was no bleeding. There was no sick bay visits. There was no marriage proposal.
K'Ehleyr and Worf's foreplay involved K'Ehleyr digging her nails into her palm so much that her palm bled. That wasn't even sex. That was foreplay. So I'm like, that
was the foreplay part. That already ended up in sick bay.
That to me, that actually bleeding. That's not a good time. Now the inhibitor's ready. They zap Deanna with the hypo spray, so she's all psychically inhibited. And Worf comes to sickbay with Maddie Calloway, so Lieutenant Kwan's, I guess, ex-girlfriend now. And she's flirting with him and bats her eyelashes. And I was like, girl, you move really fast. Your boyfriend killed himself yesterday. Okay. But all right. So Deanna is looking back and she's feeling a little jealous. Like, I just had this magical night with Worf, and he didn't seem like he was flirting with Calloway, but he certainly wasn't rejecting her flirts either. He wasn't like, please be more professional. She was just like, thank you, Worf. You're so good at this. And he's like, thank you very much. You too. He wasn't reciprocating, but he also wasn't like rejecting it. So Deanna was like, I don't know. Like she had a little feel about it.
Yeah, which is not her either.
That's so not her. Not her. She'd be like, wow, he has another lover lined up for tonight. Good for him. Maddie, why don't you and I link up and I can give you some pointers for things that he likes.
That totally would be her.
Brady, have fun.
You can have kids. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'll have him. Yeah, that's exactly.
They're all about that poly life. Yeah, I'm like, okay, nobody's feeling jealous. Cool.
I know. That's another thing. So Andrea and I have talked on the show before about how polyamory looks good on paper, but like in real life, you're like, I know I couldn't handle it.
I am not a poly. I'm not poo-pooing on it, but it's not for me. Yeah.
One of the things that does look good on paper is that people. Yeah. Well, is that lack of jealousy? Is that like, I realize that, you have more needs than I can satisfy, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know what the rationale behind it is, but that's definitely one of the many things that looks good on paper is like, I just don't get jealous. You're like the unicorn, right? Like you just don't get jealous because she's not getting mega jealous right now, but she is giving a little bit of side eye. And I also feel like, I didn't see it as super flirtatious, but it did feel like Worf was ignoring Troy a little bit.
Well, the body language.
I was kind of like,
as he's like reaching over her shoulder.
I want him to be like
close.
They just hooked up last night. I want him to be like booed up with Troy. I want him to be holding her hand while she's sitting on the table getting a hypo spray. I want her to be like, I want him to be like snuggling. I want him to be
gently
all kinds of
using his thumb to like gently wipe a little bit of like hot cocoa whipped cream like off her lip, like real cute. Like, just so sweet.
I want him to be unprofessional and show some PDA right now. Like, I want him to pay attention to Troy, and he's not really. He's just like, oh, hey, what's up? And turns around and is just like over with Calloway. You're like,
But see, this is one of my big problems with the way that they write Deanna Troi, is that her empathic powers, they sort of conveniently turn it off and on, depending on the needs of the script. So there are some situations where it's like, if she had known how this person was really feeling, she would have reacted a whole different way. And in this situation, she would have just been sitting there psychoanalyzing the heck out of this. So like she would be like catching all the love vibes from and maybe like the embarrassed in public vibes from Worf, and from Ensign Calloway, she'd been like, you really have some deep-seated psychological issues dealing with grief.
Well, 100%. She does say that Beverly's hypo spray dampened her like empathic abilities, because that's what it's supposed to do. She doesn't say it right now. She says it later on, but she says it later on where she's like, it's so weird that I can't see what people are feeling. But no, you're absolutely right. They turn it on and off when it's convenient. They absolutely do.
Yes. So they really do. It's kind of like that episode where she loses her empathic ability. That's like season 2 or something. And like, she is just really struggling. She's lost one of her senses. It's like, if I suddenly went blind, I would really, really struggle for a long time. And then you learn to adapt. But the struggle is real for her. Now, Geordi, Deanna, and Data are ready to run some tests on the nacelle tube. And again, listen, Renee and Chevalier absolutely crushed it, because all of these shots and all these angles shot like in the nacelle tube are so rad. Like Geordi and Data are in the nacelle tube and they walk around because they've turned off the plasma stream, and they remove the Odeon panel, which is such a great shot. And Lieutenant Nara mentions that Lieutenant Kwan was refitting a field coil, and that it was the first time that panel in particular had been open since the ship was built in the shipyard 8 years ago or whatever. So all these angles are just like, you're seeing this like long tube. It felt Star Wars vibes, like when Darth Vader gets thrown down like the shaft, right? Or sorry, the Emperor gets thrown down the shaft in the Return of the Jedi, where it's like these long spaces that have lights interspersed in it to give you that like depth feeling. Like, God, it was so rad.
It's about 3 seconds of the shot where they show the inside of the nacelle, of the actual nacelle. So you see like that length that it runs on the back of the ship. And it's just like a quick second of a shot. And I was like, oh, wait, go back. Why was that so short? And I wonder if it was short because if it was longer, we would be like, oh, that doesn't look good or something. I don't know. But those 2 seconds, 3 seconds, I was like, whoa, look at that. Imagine if you worked right there. Well, you could, and
so cool.
totally having like geek asthma from being so excited, like can't breathe. I'm so excited. And it was just such a short shot, but so beautiful. So we're seeing all different kinds of angles. And as Troy's under there, she starts to have more flashes, and she goes, there's something behind that panel. I feel it. So Troy's like, okay, well, let me change the scanner that I'm using. Let me just like change the output so we can X-ray the wall basically with our naked eye, which how cool is that? So he like pushes a few buttons and scans it, and we see a skeleton in the freaking wall. Thing ever.
Suddenly Geordi's got this like magic emitter that can shine like a black light beam onto the panel, and a skeleton figure comes out, and I was like, That doesn't seem sanitary or sterile. That's not sterile at all. But it was cool. And it was shocking watching it for the first time as a kid. Skeletons scared the crap out of me. They're very scary as an idea, right? So like the Royale really scared me with that skeleton in the bed shot. Of course, now as an adult, I'm like, that is, first of all, the dumbest episode ever. But two, it looks so plastic and fake.
It looks very fake, yeah. But it looks very fake. It probably didn't look that fake back in the 90s, though. Because now it's like it's
right,
HD
because it wasn't, because it wasn't all in HD. So it does look fake now. But even then, I remember this shot scaring me when I was a kid. Because I was like, oh my God, there's a skeleton in the wall. So I started worrying that skeletons were in all my walls. It's like, you can't see them. It could be there. Like, it was scary.
It made me wonder about that when the creepy guy was talking. They were talking to him, and he's like, "Oh yes, I remember working on this panel." I thought, go check that panel. There might be a skeleton behind it.
Immediately.
When he was in engineering and he said, I put the coils right behind this panel. Yeah. They need to go scan in engineering and see what else was hidden back there.
Dead body. Yeah. Well, I had to give props to my daughter because the minute they said we're going to take this panel off, she's like, I bet there's a dead body behind there.
Creepy.
Like if I was going to hide a dead body, that would be a great place to hide it.
Bingo. That would be a great place, a place where there's a plasma stream that's so powerful that like sensors, like it just sort of like blacks out all the sensors because it's like so strong. So if you're going to put a body somewhere, throw them right behind a bulkhead and a plasma stream because then you're not going to see it. But yeah, no, that was really terrifying. Now in sickbay, Beverly gives her another dose of the inhibitor because apparently the first shot wasn't enough, which I totally relate to because whenever I have like dental work done or whatever, they always have to give me like 15 shots of Novocaine because like the first 6 do nothing for me, which is just boatloads of fun to have like needles in my mouth forever.
Yeah, I'm the same, but I only do 3 and then I just tell them to do it anyways. Because my patience level after 3 injections is at 0%. So I'm like after the third one, I'm like, they're like, can you feel it? Nope, can't feel it. Just keep it going. Just pull it out. Just do whatever you need to do. Like,
you gotta do, yeah. Ugh,
let's get this over with because I don't want to be here any longer.
No, I know. Seriously, I'm like, get me the hell out of here. It's medieval doctors practice with drills and shit. But anyway, enough about how much I hate dentists. Now, she gets another shot of the inhibitor, which should keep the flashes at bay. And Maddie does come in with those bone fragments that they pulled out of the ODN panel wall. Now, I was shocked that it was an actual skeleton. I thought it was like an imprint of a skeleton, kind of like the very, very tragic and unfortunate bombing of like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where like the shadows of the people are still there, but like their bodies are not there, right? Which that's what I thought. So when they brought a fucking tray of bones, I was like, I'm out. I am so out. Those bones have been there for 7 to 8 years. And Worf goes over with Maddie to analyze the samples, and Deanna is again like not thrilled that like they're chatting
Worf
and they're
kind of like
together,
walks past Troy and is like, oh, got those bones in, huh? And you're like, oh, hey, no, hello, okay,
yes. So they discover that the remains are of a Marla Finn, and it's the woman that Deanna saw in her flashes that was like, no, stay away, right? Finn was reported missing 8 years ago, but Beverly does ask a good question, like, but how did her body become embedded in a bulkhead? That's weird.
Yeah, and so she was reported missing from Utopia Planitia, so she did work there. And she's like, but how did she get in a bulkhead, and what the heck, and and so they're like, okay, well, Kwan must have. Worf floats the idea that it was murder and her remains were hidden in the wall. And they're like, Kwan must have done it. And you must have been seeing through Kwan's eyes. And he felt so guilty 8 years later for some strange reason that he decided to kill himself out of guilt. And so that's when Troy's like, that doesn't really make any sense. Hold on, let me see something. And she does a little tippy tappy. And we find out that Kwan arrived on Utopia Planitia 6 months after this woman disappeared. There's no way she was seeing through his eyes, and there's no way that he was the one responsible. So it still makes no sense. Still doesn't make no sense.
This is where Deanna's like, I felt like I was seeing the scene through someone's eyes, but like whose? And she's like, but I saw, and they're like, maybe Pierce, because he looks creepy as fuck. Plus, he's a ginger, so he's automatically guilty, right? Like we automatically don't like him according to TV and movie law. So
isn't Beverly ginger?
Yeah, she is. But see, that's the trope, though. Ginger women, spicy, exotic, fun. Ginger men, inherently guilty.
Is that why Wesley did not have red hair? That's so interesting.
Yes, that's because everybody would have hated him, not just everybody minus you and me. But and poor redheaded men. It's like
I'm a big Wesley fan.
Yay! Welcome to the team. We'll get you a sweater and a comm badge, all set. But she realizes, because they were like, what about Pierce? Because he was creepy AF. And she's like, no, I also saw his face. which means I couldn't be seeing it through his eyes. But wait a minute, but his face did look different. And then she catches her own reflection in the panel and she's like that. It looked like that. Oh my gosh,
that scene gives me chills every time.
GBs, right? Where she's like, oh my God, that's how I was seeing his face as a reflection. So I was seeing it through Pierce's eyes. Oh my God, he's the killer. Oh my gosh. And as they turn to leave,
he's the killer and he's working in freaking engineering right now.
Ugh. Arrest him, security,
engineering. Yeah, just put a little containment field.
Put your guards by his door. Three guards by his door. Yeah, not last week, the 2 guards doesn't
or
work.
Just like lock his door. Put it. How about the brig? He killed someone. Like, come on, and hit her bones in the freaking bulkhead.
Yeah, no, that's so creepy. And as they turn.
This was creepier to me than the skeleton. The scene where she's like, "Oh, it was his reflection." Always creeped me out more than the skeleton because I'm like, I don't know. I think it's not the fact that it was a reflection, but it's that stare that he has that looks psychotic, and it's so like he's looking at you, but he's really looking at himself. But it's like it seems like in your vision he's staring at you like he's going to eat you up next, and it's like, oh, get me out of here.
So my question though, when I could step back away from the creepy factor, is at what point in the story is he looking at a screen? So he just got done shooting somebody or like discovering that they were, and he's going to be like, oh, but now before I stuff you in this bulkhead, let me check to make sure that you know.
I mean, I feel like they're always looking at panels, and that vision could have been out of order. Yeah. It was just a flash of him looking at himself and a flash of her screaming and a flash of them making out, but not necessarily.
That was my thought. Yeah. Also, you know, like all the panels like in the hallways that you could just touch and the computer in season 1 would tell you like how to get somewhere, which I kind of wish they still had that, but I guess by season 7, everyone knows where they're going. But like you walk past all of that. So it's kind of just like a black mirror, you know, where you can see yourself sort of at all times. So I was thinking that it's like you can catch your own reflection, but not necessarily in order. Yeah. Now, as they turn to leave, Worf makes a show of stopping to thank Ensign Calloway, who's like, no problem, Worf. Cute. My boyfriend committed suicide 2 days ago. Yeah. Now, Deanna is further weirded out by this, and she and Worf, you know, go off into the turbo lift to go do their job. And she's like, Worf, this is kind of aggressive, very out of character. Worf, do you regret being with me? Because I don't want to risk our friendship. Like she's starting to kind of spin a little bit. And I do love the way that Worf kind of stops her spin. And he looks at her so lovingly and he calls her Deanna. And I love it. He's like, Deanna, I would never regret being with you. And I was like, oh, these are the words that everyone wants to hear sometimes. I don't care how long you've been married. Sometimes you want to hear those words. It's nice to hear. I love the way he looks at her. It was great. And he asks her what's wrong. And she's like, I'm just not feeling myself. Which I was like, totally. Because like, you're not the jealous type, you know?
And this is the part where she says her empathic abilities have been hindered. And she's like, I can't sense what people are feeling and it's throwing me off.
Yes. Welcome to being human now. And he's like, you know what? Since you're feeling really off, I will go and interview Lieutenant Pierce alone. And he says, and I'll come. I love that he didn't even ask. He just assumed. He's like, I'll meet you at your quarters after. And she goes, I'll be waiting. And I was like, oh, she just needed some reassurance, which we all need sometimes. Like everybody needs it. In her quarters alone, however, she's like pacing around. She's got the gray jumpsuit with the purple trim. So I was like, ooh, okay. She's like in a uniform, but slightly different.
Yeah. It's like her Friday casual or something. Because it's not
it's her casual Friday look.
Yeah, it's not her normal like going out outfit, but it's also not her uniform. And anyways, she's chilling out, and then there's like I was gonna say a knock at the door, but they don't knock, like the doorbell chime. And so she's like, oh, come in, and it's Pierce. And you're like, what the F?
Ultra creepy
Weren't
stare.
She supposed to be like being interrogated or by Worf or in the brig or something? And so she immediately hits her comm badge and she's like, security to my room immediately. And I was like, yes, that was the right call, because I feel like season 1 Troy would be like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Well, what do you want? Oh,
girl,
no, get off me. And you're like,
season 4 or 5 Troy, before Jericho came and made her put her boobs away and take her brain out. Like I just wrote in all caps, finally, someone does this move after 7 effing years. We're like, there's some creep at the door and you call for security right now. Yeah, usually they try to reason with them or wrestle for the phaser. It's like, no, back up.
And
right
security
now
is usually trash, but the security actually comes very quickly in this. Like I noticed, I was like, whoa, the security got there like pretty quick. So even if he did attack her or something, assuming it was like physical attack, not a phaser, because it doesn't matter how fast you come, you're not gonna be fast enough. But if he was like, wrestling with her or something like that, they would have come in plenty of time to knock him out. So I was actually like, well done, security. You showed up when you were supposed to. You got to her quarters super freaking fast. But she's like, but before they come, she's like, what did you do to Worf? What have you done to him? Because now she's having visions of Worf being buried behind some freaking panel in engineering or something like that. And Pierce is like, I don't know what you're talking about. He told me that you wanted to see me. It's like, why would Worf do that? You know he's a serial, he's a psycho killer. Why would you send him to her quarters?
This is all wrong.
So she's like, Worf, she's coming over to Worf. He's not answering anything. So then she's like, computer, where's Worf? Locate Worf. And it says Lieutenant Worf is in Ensign Calloway's quarters. And you're like, well, so now you're like, oh, great, he's alive. I'm sorry, he's where? It's like, you're feeling a lot of things in this moment. And at that moment, security comes in and Troy's like, take him to his quarters and hold him there. I was like, oh, yes, girl. You got that commander. You passed that commander's test and look at you giving commands. Hold him. Okay.
By the way, you guys can't see this, but Heidi and I can see Shereese just started doing this real sassy dance move. And I was like, yes, yes, she did. Troy did that. Right? Like all of that.
I love that. That was probably my favorite scene from this episode was when she was like, take him to his quarters and hold him.
I love when she gets serious like that. I love that. She gave that command with no qualms whatsoever. And they were like, yes, sir. And took him away. Now, Deanna
and she wasn't like cowering before him.
No. She was like,
hey, she was like, what are you doing in my room?
In his face. Right?
Get out of here. Are you here to drop off a stone hieroglyph? Is that who this was from last week? From Masks? Dropping shit off my quarters?
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know why you're in here.
Locks.
Right? Locks. Thank you. By the way, did you notice even in the hallucinations, the lock button is a blue comm badge symbol? It's the blue like Star Trek symbol. It's like the little kind of triangular-y, like the same symbol on the comm badge. Girl, that's what the locks are. It's apparently the doorbell and the lock is just a comm badge.
That sounds efficient.
I was like, I guess they got their branding manager on point because like everything is super branded in Starfleet. So she wastes no time like trouncing herself over to Ensign Calloway's quarters, and she wants to ring the doorbell. She goes to push the blue comm badge button, and she decides to use good old abuse of power and just use her rank to get a security override on the door, because she's like, if they're doing something, I want to catch them at it. I do not want to like have the doorbell and then they like pull apart and it's like, we
were just working on sorting bones, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In my quarters after hours.
Yeah,
isn't that how everybody does it?
Over bottles of wine, right? So she uses her rank to get the security override on the door, and I was like, that's the spirit, Troy. Let your paranoia run away with itself. And she walks in to find Calloway and Worf embracing, and it's the same pattern as that hallucination she had, which we don't know she's in a hallucination now, but they pause and then they start laughing. And she's like, stop laughing. And by the way, Marina Sirtis, A+, because I don't know if it was makeup or lighting and acting or all those things combined. When she walked in the room and was shocked to find them kissing, her whole face, like she was not beautiful at all. She was like haggard and stressed and afraid and terrified and shocked. And she killed it because Marina Sirtis is such a beautiful woman. She's like gorgeous and everything. But
she
this one,
sleeps pretty.
I mean, she sleeps pretty.
that scene
with
where
that little off
Worf
the shoulder.
Yeah, I'm like, how does somebody wake up looking that beautiful?
Yeah, she wakes up looking like this. She really does. But she looked awful. She looked like she'd been through a trauma, right? And so she's furious that they keep laughing and they won't stop laughing, which is fucking weird. And there's a phaser on the table, which did Worf check his gun at the door when he came in? Like, I don't understand why there's a phaser there, but she grabs it and she fucking shoots and kills Worf. She just kills him.
In like this fit of rage, she's like, stop laughing at me. And they're like, they just laugh harder and harder. So she picks up the phaser, she shoots him, and there's this big burn symbol right over one of his 3 hearts, and he's laying on the ground, and Ensign Calloway bends over him and is like, he's dead. You killed him. Which really, I think you would have to shoot a few times because of all his redundant systems, but whatever, he's dead. So she's like, you killed him. And Troy is like horrified. She drops the phaser, like out of shock, like you always see in the old timey movies when they drop the gun and run away.
Totally.
She drops the phaser and she just backs out of the room and she's like, I don't know what just happened. So she takes off running down the hallway and she happens to somehow run into Pierce, who's being taken to his quarters by the security guards who happen to be coming down that hallway. Okay, yeah. Sure.
Of the 50 decks you have, this is the one apparently.
Yeah, he must be in the room right next to Ensign Calloway. And so she bounces off his chest and he looks at her and then he goes, "You know what you have to do." And you're like, oh my gosh, so he knows what happened and he knows what you just witnessed and he knows what's going on right now. How does he know so much? And he did
this to Dan. He did this to Dan also. He had to have, because that's why Dan kept saying, I know what I have to do. I know what I have to do.
Yes. And you're like, get airlock this guy. We're done with Briggs. Airlock. He is too dangerous.
100%.
But at this point, I didn't know what was going on because I never do, but I know that this is not happening in reality. So there's some point where it's it's believable up to a point, and then at some point you look back, you're like, oh no, this is not really happening. And for me, it was the point at which she had on her what is it, purple, her other uniform.
Her Friday casuals.
Yeah, her Friday casuals.
Casual Friday, yeah.
That to me was like a callback to an earlier Deanna. That was not like the professional Deanna.
Yeah.
That was like, why would you change? No. This is like a scene in a play. This is not something that's really happening to you. And I know now that none of this was really happening to her. But everything from that point on, I felt like, is she like going to wake up in a sick bay? That's what I thought was going to happen. I thought she was going to wake up, maybe there was something in the injection that they gave her, but I knew, so I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, Deanna just shot Worf, because
because you're like, no, she didn't. There's no way she did.
It couldn't have been. Yeah, there's something wrong here.
You're more just like, what's going on with her and what's going on with Pierce. Because you're like, I know Worf isn't dead, but what is going on? Something's going on.
Yes. And especially I think the angle that they shot Pierce when he's like, you know what you have to do. It felt like a dream episode, kind of a fisheye lens or something weird. It felt dreamy where you're like, yeah, okay. We're not in reality at this point. I don't know how or why or when we got out of reality, but something's wrong here. But she does run to the nacelle room and she says, I know what I have to do. And she moves to jump in the plasma stream. But at the last second, a very much alive Worf pulls her back and goes, Counselor, what are you doing? And she's in her blue uniform again. Her hair's different. So it's like, it was a hallucination. And again, see, for me, I'm like, I don't even know when this hallucination started, but here we are, oh my God. And she's like, you're alive. Oh, and she hugs him and she's like, which I have experienced in a very, very small, tiny way. I remember being in a long-term relationship, in my 20s, and I had a dream that was a very realistic dream that I somehow cheated on my boyfriend. And the dream wasn't the cheating part. The dream was in the dream, the cheating had already happened. And I was just trying to figure out oh my God, I have just destroyed my relationship. What am I going to do? How am I going to tell him? Oh my God, this is terrible. And then I woke up and I was like, it was a dream. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Oh my God. It was so terrifying. And so I very much felt how Troy felt, where she was like, oh my God, it wasn't real. Thank God. It was terrible. I'm no longer with that guy, but even still, it was so scary to be like, how am I going to break this to him? And oh my God, what have I done? Yeah.
It's this level of guilt and all the feelings that she had described at the beginning of the episode that now have been replaced by relief. Right. And so, she just hugs Worf and she's like, oh my gosh, everything's okay. And the next scene, we're in the observation lounge and now they're kind of doing the explanation of absolutely everything for our benefit, because up to this point, we've been in question mark land of what's real and what's not.
Yeah,
and we absolutely for sure all knew that this part couldn't be real because there's no way Worf just died. And there's no way if he did die that Troy killed him. None of that part was real. So you're like, where did the line happen? So it turns out that everything she experienced happened in those initial 90 seconds when she first went back to the catwalk with Worf. And
the second time on the
because the first time she went by herself. Yeah. So when she went with Worf, that's when this happened. And this also explains
because the first time she was alone, Lieutenant Nara was there, but Lieutenant
Nara had left though, so she was in the room by herself.
Yeah, that's right.
That first time. Yeah. So this also explained why Quan died so suddenly and unexpectedly, because in that same 90 seconds, he also went through a whole 5 days worth of experiences that led him to murdering his girlfriend and her lover, and then feeling extremely guilty and hopeless about that and taking this really rash action. So now it explains why someone who was so healthy, well-adjusted, happy, looking forward to life could possibly do this with absolutely no signs or symptoms whatsoever. It was because of this mind flaying that's going on here.
Yeah.
And
mind flaying.
That's a great
term.
And it makes me really sad for what he experienced internally during those 10 seconds that he was standing there. But it could have gone on for days for him too, suffering and thinking that his girlfriend had been unfaithful and all that.
And that he had murdered her. Like, it's both things. It's like the loss of trust, of that loved one, but then also the like horror that you killed two people.
Yes.
Like all of it, like it's catching up with you. And now you're like, what am I going to do? How can I get out of this? And this is the only way, right? Yeah. Horrible. So Data has up on the screen a picture of Pierce and the couple. And he's like, he says, oh, it turns out that Pierce was partially telepathic. His grandmother was Beta Z. And so he had a little bit in there, even though he's mostly human, he does have a little bit of that empathic ability, at least enough to block other people, which is so interesting because Troy's empathic abilities were blocked by Pierce's empathic abilities in a hallucination brought on by empathic echoes. So none of this was real.
So Inception-y.
Yeah, so Inception-y. And then here's the part that I like. When he turns off that panel with their 3 pictures, we see the most gorgeous schematic of the Enterprise. And I was like, I want that painting on my wall so much. Like, it just was so cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
But now we're getting all the answers. And so it's like, oh, okay, this does explain it. And this does explain everything. Sort of. Yeah, I know, Heidi, you had a question about this.
Yeah, well, so many questions. But like one thing is that I just can't reconcile Pierce's character as it's portrayed in Hallucination with, feelings of regret and guilt. And he just seems like the kind of person who would be like, you deserved it.
He's like a stone cold killer, right?
Yeah. So trying to reconcile, was that her projection of him at what he would be like? But then she was him. I could talk. It's never going to make sense, and I just have to accept that. And I just keep going back to that Worf line. There are things we do not understand, yet they exist nonetheless. I will never understand this episode, yet it exists nonetheless. And it was fun and it was cool, and I'll never watch it again because I don't like feeling so confused. But I did. Like I said, I was watching with my daughter. I mean, this kind of launched us into a question I want to pose to both of you, which is if you had the choice between telepathic powers, like Deanna was describing about her grandfather, that they could just have conversations in their head, and empathic powers where you knew, like you could just scan the room and know how everybody's feeling, which would you choose?
Andrea?
So this is between being able to communicate telepathically or just sensing how everybody feels in the room.
Yeah. Would you rather be able to like send your thoughts to somebody, or would you rather be able to like sense what everybody's feeling?
Oh my God. 100% telepathic communication ability, because I feel that I am fairly empathic as a person anyway. I tend to register what people are feeling just by like reading body language and their, whatever. And that can be overwhelming already. And if I'm in a room with a group of people who are all feeling really anxious, I start to feel a little bit anxious myself. So I already don't want that. And I also never want to really know how people feel about me, because I feel like everybody in the room would just hate me, which I'm like afraid of, so I'm like, I don't want to, it's too much. But to be able to like just telepathically, well, yeah, like, but telepathically to be able to speak with someone, oh, that would be so cool. So cool. I feel that sign language has some of that vibe. Like when I have had a bunch of friends who are like sign language interpreters, and they've taught me a bunch of the language. And I really love speaking sign language. You communicate without opening your mouth. So there's some of that similarity, but it is really, really cool. And sign language kind of feels like a superpower anyway, because like I use sign language when I surf, because then you don't have to try to shout over like crashing waves with people. Especially if you have water in here, or like in a very quiet place where you can't talk a lot, like a library, or a very loud place like a concert where you're like, what, like over and over again. Just like sign language is like perfect. It's perfect for that. So I already love that. So I think being able to like up that to the next level and non-verbally communicate with my brain, oh my God, so cool. Shereese, what do you think?
Yeah, I would pick telepathic 1,000%. I thought you were going to pick empath because you are pretty empathic, Andrea. So I thought for sure you were going to be like, oh, more of my emotions and being in touch with everyone else's emotions and blah, blah, blah. So I'm surprised that you were
already overwhelming as it is. I don't think I need more.
I'm good with the level that I have. I would agree. I'm also good with the level that I have. I would definitely pick telepathic as long as communicating telepathically does not mean people can read my thoughts. As long as it's just like, I mean, without my permission, as long as it's just like our verbal conversations where I talk, you talk, and we communicate, and it's just the same way, but we just don't use our vocal cords. I am totally good with that. But when it comes to like mind reading and getting in my business, or me reading your mind and knowing stuff I don't want to know, hard pass on that. What about you, Heidi?
Oh, I would pick empath, because being such a strong.
Sorry.
I will give you all of my reasons why I would like to gain the ability to read emotions. Yeah, because I just struggle with understanding other people's feelings. And so just to know
you're a thinker.
Yes, I'm a thinker. And I mean, I'm a very compassionate person. So when I know that someone's hurting, I'm going to be there for them. But just knowing all the nuances of emotional vibes, I would like to know that. And also, I think there's this episode about Troy where Riker comments that, like, I always thought that you always had a little bit of an edge. Like this, your empathic abilities give you confidence because you can walk into any situation and not have to worry about hidden threats or ulterior motives. Like, you just know. So on the one hand, I'm with you, Andrea, like you always feel like everybody hates me. But on the other hand, it would be nice to walk into a room and like, no, they don't. They're just kind of thinking about what they're going to eat tonight, and they're not thinking about you. They don't hate you. There's no animosity there. So yeah, I'm kind of jealous of that. The confidence.
Well, I will say, like, I am a pretty empathetic person. But I still am always afraid that everybody hates me, even though I know, like, everybody's so focused on themselves. Nobody really cares about you or anybody else. Like, everybody's focused on themselves. So yeah, I will say, as a person who has a great deal of empathy in just my personality, it doesn't necessarily make it any easier. I don't know everybody doesn't hate me. I mean, I feel like logically I know that, but emotionally I'm like, oh, I must get on so many nerves.
Because I think it's more than just I mean, in this show it's pretty clear cut, like telepath, empath is the same exact thing on the show for some reason. But it's pretty clear cut, like when they flex those superpowers. But I think in real life everything is so layered and nuanced. Like relationships are nuanced, like our personal backstory is nuanced, like how we function in our jobs and with our friends and with our family. It's all nuanced, and it's not just so like, oh, you're feeling happy, you're feeling sad, you feel this way towards me. Like it's never that clear cut. Like sometimes I'll snap at people because I'm hungry. Like you could feel the snappiness from the inside and the outside. You could feel the telepathic me criticizing you.
Yeah,
but the truth is, I need a snack. It has nothing to do. Like all those interpretations would be incorrect to the situation, right? Because we're so layered. Now, in this case, apparently there was some kind of lover's quarrel, just like in the visions, and Pierce killed the two of them and then threw their bodies into the plasma stream to hide his crime, and then threw himself in the plasma stream to cover all of it up. So all three of them have just been turned into cellular residue on the inside of the nacelle tube. And they were all reported missing, or not reported missing. They weren't reported missing. In reality, that was in the hallucination. In reality, they all were said to have died in a accident in that room. So people know that they died there, but they thought it was some kind of accident. What kind of accident could cause three of them to die? Nobody knows, but it was just some fluke accident. And that's when Troy is like, oh, no, I don't think this was an accident. I think this was murder-suicide, which is so crazy to like get the real story on this 8 years later. There's really nothing to do with this information. Like, I would rather, I know this is a lie, and I probably wouldn't say this if this, this probably isn't totally true, but like if I had heard that my loved one died in an accident 8 years ago, and then now 8 years later, you tell me actually they were murdered, that would be horrible. Let me believe they died in an accident. There's nothing you need to do with that information. It's 8 years ago. I've grieved. I've moved on. It was a freak accident.
Let's not bring it all back up. Yeah,
let's not bring it up and bring it back up in a way where now I want justice and revenge. and the person who killed them
way
is
more
also
traumatizing, than like an accident.
Yeah,
because you're like, now there was malice involved.
Exactly.
And that's horrible.
Now that happened on purpose as opposed to a total accident that could have happened to anyone.
Yeah.
So there's really nothing
except
to do
from
with
the
this
point
info.
of view of like somebody who is on the Enterprise. I'd be like, oh, well, thank goodness it was a suicide and not an accident that could like happen anytime to anybody who happens to be in
I guess that's true. Yeah. Because you're like, you just slip and fall. Again, handrails, you know? Again,
let's go ahead and make a window, people.
This is really a ghost story.
Close that up.
This is a ghost story. And you know, I think
it is. I didn't think of that.
Yeah. And about how people's actions, especially actions out of trauma or creating trauma, they resonate. I think there is like what they call empathic echoes. There are trauma echoes, and being in a place where a loved one has experienced trauma, or where you have, I mean, in your childhood, or the date, you know, anniversaries, or you know, just, or even just like seeing a reflection that reminds you of that person, that we're always kind of bringing up those empathic echoes, and they're real to us, just like this was to Deanna. She said, it was so real.
But I agree with you. That was beautifully put. And I did write in my notes, okay, so can we clean this out? Like, can we give it a good scrubbing or something? Because now
can we get like a baryon sweep through here? Yeah, because any empath.
That's what I said. Any empath or telepath, any Vulcan, any Beta Z, any whatever millions of other species that have this telepathic or empathic ability happen to just be walking along, can get zapped with this crazy energy and try to kill themselves. That's not even their thing. Yeah. And it's like, this to me is like major hazard. Even if it's only 1% of your whole crew, you know, and this guy, Pierce, it was his grandmother that was a Beta Z. It was like the most distant, not the most distant, but it was like a pretty removed, limited amount of ability that sunk into him that was able to create this. So somebody who's like Troy or like Quan, who have a bigger ability,
or Luoxana, who's like
or Luoxana, or a Vulcan,
she wasn't in that room.
Like, it would have just like it would have been so much more intense. So that's what I wrote in my note. I was like, okay, if this is really like residue that's embedded in the walls or whatever, let's go ahead and give this a big old scrubbing, or we need to put some signs on the door that's like, unfortunately, empaths can't work in this space. Like, which is crazy. But that's this
like
space
a peanut allergy.
Exactly, like a peanut allergy. Like a peanut allergy. I'm sorry, peanuts are manufactured in this nacelle tube. You cannot work in this nacelle tube.
Right.
Because not without some hypo spray.
Or maybe like a door that doesn't open or something. You know, we need some kind of barriers to protect them. That's what I thought. I was just like, this is a huge risk.
At the beginning, they were all asking, so what was going on with Quan? What happened to him? You know, like what was going on inside of him? Even Geordi's comment to Data when he was trying to explain it never kind of sat well with me, because it's like, well, if only he'd been able to handle his problems better, he wouldn't have committed. And I, as someone with family members and loved ones that really struggle with mental health issues, I think it's always the temptation to be like focused on that person. But here, like you said, it had nothing whatsoever to do with him except the fact that he had this gift, and which should have been something positive in his life, but certainly not something to die over.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think too that I'm glad that we're starting to move away from this idea, but to, you know, we tend to look at people who have attempted suicide or who have committed suicide to be like, well, they were weak, or they were, it's like, that's not anything to do. It doesn't have anything to do with weakness. It doesn't. And it's not, it is an action that you take, but it doesn't, I don't think it's a choice really. You know what I mean? Like it's an action. It's kind of like drug addiction, right? Where it's like, you are doing the action to put the drugs in your system, but it is an illness that needs to be looked at completely, you know what I mean? Like palliatively as well. It's like,
it's not a willpower thing. And it's not a,
it's not.
It's not a willpower
thing. And literally
thing.
His words are, I know what I have to do. It was a compulsion.
Yes, he had to. Well, here's the difference between Dan and Troy that I thought stood out. Riker was able to speak to Dan, and Dan was able to respond. Troy, apparently Worf had been like, counselor, hello, and then finally snatched her back. She was not aware that he was speaking to her at all because she was in the hallucination and didn't hear him, which I was like, that's weird. How come Dan was able to sort of be like out of the hallucination, but also in it at the same time. And Troy was just completely in the bubble. Maybe because her telepathic abilities were greater, I'm guessing.
Who knows? Because they're both half human. So they're both half human, half telepathic species. She's half Beta Set, he's half Napian, which is another cool name.
So super cool, yeah.
So it could totally be a levels thing. It could be who knows what. It could be that he was caught off guard, but she was embracing whatever it was. You know, she wanted to experience it because she was trying to investigate, and he was just like walking along, you know, tightening a screw.
And got sucked into a
so maybe he was less inundated in it, or maybe who knows what was going on with this. But in the end, we get the solution, we get the answers, and I felt like, okay, like I bought it. The very last scene, because we can't end on that note. I think that's such a bummer.
Right.
And it's supposed to be, I feel like it's supposed to be a bummer, but they don't want to end on that note. So next scene, we're on the bridge, and Worf takes Troy aside and says, I noticed that you were very surprised to see me alive and well when I like snatched you from your certain death. What was that about? And Troy just kind of smiles and winks and is like, you know what they say, Mr. Worf, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and then goes and gets on the turbo lift. And Worf is like, what?
Mic drop.
Well, he says, you were relieved that I was alive, and Deanna tells him in the hallucination he was killed. And Worf says, may I ask by whom? And that's when she says, hell has no fury like a woman scorned, you know, and like kind of walks away all sassy. So yeah, when he was asking like, who was my killer? She's like, and I was like, okay, see that answer right there? Was it you, Troy? Because I feel like it was you. Like, you're very obviously saying it was you, right? Like, did you fucking kill me in your hallucination?
She's
and
so
how
cheeky.
do we not repeat that? She's very cheeky. I like how she's cheeky with Worf a few times. Like, it definitely shows a growth and a development in their interpersonal relationship, which I think is really cute. I really do think that.
I'm also glad she didn't say it was me.
Cute.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I
was stuck on the like, you killed me in your hallucination. Like I was just stuck on that as you were talking. Like
forward, yeah.
I'm glad she didn't say me. I shot you, because I'd be like, oh,
well.
I was kind of struck that Worf asks. He didn't say like if it was me, and so he said,
"How did I die?"
Yeah, I'd be like, "How did I die?" But she was like, "Who killed me?" So I was like, like he can go take.
He already knows.
John.
He already knows somebody killed him.
Engage femme fatale powers. You know what they say. Like she gets all flirty. Yeah. Instead, I've been like me. It was me. But here were the circumstances. I will say this though. I like that this episode, the crime is truly a crime of passion, right? Like Pierce walked in on them and acted in a rage. Troy walks in on Calloway and Worf and acts in a rage, right? Crimes of passion seem so crazy because they're so counter like how the person normally behaves, but they are very, very common. Like our human psyche, our ability to maintain our own personality is actually quite fragile. You throw in a couple extenuating circumstances and all of a sudden we're grabbing phasers and shooting people because they're laughing at us, right? Which is why we have seen such a huge uptick, especially since the pandemic, of people freaking out on airplanes and having to be dragged off and all this stuff where you're like, what the hell is happening to everybody? It's like, yeah, you turn the screws on people a little bit and they start to act out in ways that they never have before. So I was thinking about the play and then subsequently the movie Chicago, where like it was a crime of passion as well. And Shawshank Redemption was a crime of passion as well. I walked in on my wife with someone else and I killed them both or something. And you're like, damn.
And every time I hear
like you at all.
Every time I hear those stories, I'm like, yep. You're just like, that's of course what somebody would do. That's why
that's what you would do.
You already know
that's why you don't laugh at someone. Like that's why you don't laugh at people.
At least not when they have a weapon nearby. Like, yeah, this is what people do. And it's always like shocking and sad and stuff, but it's also like, yeah, it's not only is it common, but it's like very understandable. It's very much like, this is how people are. People act like this. This is how people respond to walking in on their spouse in the bed with somebody else. They go crazy. They don't just go, oh my gosh, John, I can't believe this. That's not how people react. People go crazy and do crazy things. I guess not all people, but I think a lot of people.
Enough.
More than enough people that it's never shocking. It's not like somebody who really has lost their mind and they are really unpredictable. That to me is extremely predictable.
Heidi,
you're shaking your head.
I'm shaking my head because it's like, I never get that. Like Romeo and Juliet, the whole premise, how they just they fell so madly in love, even though he was in love with somebody else, like, the previous day. And then,
right? He totally was.
They want to get married. And then, yeah. And then he's like, well, if I can't live with you, I'm going to kill myself. And you killed yourself, so I'm going to kill myself. I just
that was totally stupid. But that was like kids being dumb, and that kids do dumb stuff because they're kids.
Also, she didn't wrong him. Like, she didn't.
This is different.
She like, air quote, died. She like took the sleeping draft or whatever, and he was like, I can't live without you, my love. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, that's a little bit more like, man, you don't need to stop with the hormones.
Like melodramatic kid stuff. But this when like you are with somebody you love and you walk in on them having sex with someone else in your bed. Absolutely,
and they laugh at you.
Well, whatever, they could do anything. They could do nothing. They could just look at you and be like, "Oops." But the sight, the thought, the fact that you've been, so like lied to, violated, like all those emotions,
all of that, betrayed.
That makes people snap, and snap may look like yelling and screaming. Snap may look like shooting them both dead. Snap may look like dragging them out into the middle of the street butt naked. Like, snap could look like a lot of things, but whatever the thing you do in that moment, it's not the thing you do in the rest of your day. This is how people end up
burning down the house or something because like
with someone inside. Like they just do stuff that they would never do in their right mind. But it's
and you're like Janice. She was the quietest little accountant we ever had in the business, and now she's on trial for multiple murders. Like, what? It doesn't add up.
Yeah, and see, that's why I wonder how this would have landed differently had Pierce been portrayed as somebody who was like more mild mannered, like not somebody
not
a
creep.
Because then I'm like, well, what? Yeah, good for you, Marla, getting away from this creepy guy, and I would be with this other guy. Yeah, that's too
right. You're like, I don't even know the circumstances, but Pierce would not be the way to go.
Bad choice. Yeah. So what would it have been like? Because what you're describing there is different from where the hallucinations set us up to think that Pierce is this really creepy guy who would like, kill somebody as soon as they would look at them, and like master manipulator. And we know that Troy is not that. And so that's why there was a little bit of dissonance for me, because if she's seeing this through Pierce's eyes, for her to make that leap, not just in the behavior, but in the orientation, I can't see Troy as creepy. I'm sorry. I just can't go there. I can understand her like being impulsive or snap or passionate, but serial killer Troy. No, I don't get that.
I see where you're coming from with that for sure.
That Troy would never have picked up the phaser.
Troy wouldn't have been jealous in the first place. She would have been like, wow, cute, more love to go around. All right, well, I'll see you later when you're done with Calloway. You come to my quarters. Take a shower though first, and then come see me.
She would have absolutely said that. She would have absolutely been like,
I'm so sorry for intruding.
I was going to say, that's what she would have said. Because when she was making out with that guy, or when she had just had sex with that guy and Riker walked in on them and they were like, he was like getting dressed. He was like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I'll come back later. Like, that's exactly what she would have said if she walked in on them. She would have been like, oops. Sorry, I should have knocked. Sorry. Check you guys later.
That's right. And we do know that Troy has a dark side because we saw that in the episode with the guy with the weird crystal.
Yes, that's the same episode. Yeah, I think. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And so we do know that Troy has a dark side, but the way it was manifest there was just very different. Like that, even that Troy, I can't.
It wasn't our Troy.
But I'll tell you, and this wasn't like they were married and all that stuff. But I will tell you, if I was on the ship and there was some long-standing couple that have been together forever, and so catches so cheating in their quarters, and then we find out that they took a phaser to them, I'd be like, I wouldn't be like, what? It's unbelievable. I'd be like, that's what people do.
Shereese is really good at getting human nature, so she's really rarely shocked by stuff. She really is. You could be like, and then my neighbor did this crazy thing, and she's like, yeah, that's what happens. I'm like, really? Because I'm shocked. And she's like, Anyway, so lunch. It's really not. Shereese is like the definition of unfazed. So Heidi, as our guest, what were your final thoughts on this episode?
I'm confused.
Same.
Kind of ending where we started, but taking back to when I watched this the first time, like, in the olden days where you just could watch the episode and then that was it. And maybe wait years to catch it on syndication, but you're just like, what, wait, what just happened? Like, and you're just trying to remember the sequence of things. And so it was just such a big muddled mess in my mind. And now, with my happy little Roku, and I can like reverse, and I had so I went back and I watched, I was like, oh, okay, that does make sense. But like the part about the inhibitor, I didn't get that. Like this wouldn't have happened if Troy had her empathic powers, because she would have known that something's up. So even in the hallucination, she had to have the inhibitor, so she would lose her empathic powers. But that never clicked to me until, I mean, that all part always confused me until we had this conversation. So because of that, it still feels a little unsatisfying.
Okay.
Because I'm just in that fuzzy zone. It's kind of like when you've had a bad dream and you wake up from the dream and like, maybe like I've had dreams where like, Jim did something terrible in my dream. And then I'm like, I'm mad at him when I wake up. Like it's so unjustified.
Classic. Totally.
Yeah.
Jim
like,
is her husband,
wait,
by the way.
Yeah.
Jim is Heidi's husband. Sorry,
yes.
Jim.
Yes. He's a wonderful husband. He would never do anything like that terrible. He would never do anything terrible at all.
Right.
But,
in your dream.
I'm just in my dream, or even in my dreams where I've done something terrible. And then I wake up and I'm like, but I'm still that person that came up with that terrible thing in my dream. And I really do believe that our dreams tell us something important about ourselves, even if they don't, line up with what in reality in terms of what happens. And so,
right.
I think what's satisfying to me about this episode is how this, even though it was a hallucination, it helps Troy get in touch with her feelings for Worf. And I don't know
do like that.
Without this, kind of triggering incident, if she would have taken the steps to a relationship with him that she does later, or Worf himself had.
Yeah, you're right. Because when we saw the relationship in parallels, that was Worf jumping through different realities. So Troy was not on board with any of that. So this is now her way of sort of exploring that as well. And I think it's kind of cute that both of them are kind of starting to sort of gravitate towards each other a little bit more. I think that's pretty cool.
We really do. So my final thoughts were, I like this one. It's kind of like a dream episode, but with an actual plot. And that's why I like it. That's really all I wrote for my final thoughts, but I will add that because, one of our listeners keeps messaging us and being like, you guys are so funny. You'll be like, this was a great episode. I'll never watch it again. And I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I said, I'm glad we make you laugh because that's absolutely true. There are some episodes where we're like, this is great, but that doesn't mean I'm going to put it on my rewatch list. It's not something I want to watch over and over and over. And this falls in that bucket for me. Like, I like this episode. It's not making my rewatch list. It's not making my top 25. It's not making this is the best episode ever. If I have like a chill day and I'm like, oh, I just want to watch something good and like warm and cozy, I'm not turning to this. This makes me feel icky and weird. But I do like it. I just won't be adding it to the rewatch. What about you, Andrea?
It's a good episode, but we have so many super, 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 super strong episodes in TNG that those are the ones I'm going to gravitate towards. Those have a much higher, like, gravimetric hold on me. Like, I will gravitate to those episodes. These ones I'll be like, yeah, it's all right. But like, it wasn't the Ghost Sex episode. It wasn't Aquiel. It wasn't the Royale. Like,
it wasn't horrible. It wasn't something you want to
hate.
Set fire to.
No,
but it also
I don't
wasn't
like
like
this episode.
Let's watch it again as soon as we're done watching it.
Yeah.
I think Aquiel is a better episode than this one, but that's
we're just going to go ahead and say false.
Agree to disagree.
This is true. Agree to disagree, which is actually what we love and why we love the sci-fi community so much, because it's created such a sense of community in like the Trek world, where we have people emailing us from all over the world being like, I disagree with your point on this, and this, and here's why. And it's like, I love it. I'm not that person that's like, no, you're wrong. It's a sucky episode. Like, I hate it, but I'm just one opinion out of the millions. Like, mine isn't the right one or the wrong one. It's just is.
And I also love the emails that we get where they're like, oh, I totally agree. And then they're like, I always had that question too. That part doesn't make any sense either. And I'm like, right. It's like, we've always been like, why, this doesn't make any sense. Can someone explain this? Which I feel like, that's why I love Lower Decks. Cause I feel like Lower Decks took all those complaints and just turned it into animated form where they were like, yep.
And turned it into like comedy, which is so great.
Now, I will say that if you like, what was that horrible episode? Oh, I will say that if you like Code of Honor, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that one just has like such epically racist tones. It's not even undertones. It's like overtones.
Yes.
Yeah, it's massive racist overtones. Yeah, so that part not so good.
Nope,
not so good.
Okay.
Now, Heidi, if our listeners want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Well, if you want to know the books that I have written, nonfiction, you can go to my author page on Amazon. So amazon.com/author/Heidi Unruh. If you want to read my fun stuff, like my fiction and poetry, you can go to vocal.media /author/Sonia-Heidi/Unruh. And my name is spelled Heidi, last name Unruh. And if you want to know about the work I do as a writing coach, it is tinyurl.com/shine writing for my shine writing services.
Awesome. This has been so much fun to have you and to get to have your perspective. And we think you're great. So we're just going to completely overlook the fact that you love Aquiel. But other than that, it's been really, really fun having you as a guest. And
yeah,
the guest episodes are always like mega marathon episodes. So this one's probably gonna be like 2 hours long, but who cares? Like there's a lot to pick apart in this episode. Yes. There's so much to dissect and talk about. Guys, next week we are breaking down season 7, episode 19, Genesis. Cannot wait to talk about that one. Thank you so much for nerding out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.